Okay. Hey, how's everyone doing today? Hope everyone's doing good. Um, so yeah, we've got some stuff to talk about. The main things are going to be the ongoing strain on the healthcare system and how, especially in like Quebec, because the ERs are being like over overstrained there, and then like the more underfunding of the clinics and the healthcare system just in general. Um, and then we'll be talking about Lula being sworn in as the president of Brazil, which is exciting. And then we'll be talking about the death of the Pope that's in Italy. So that's fun. And then we have some updates on the Idaho stabbings from that university kid who decided to, you know, be a psycho. And then we have an interview with Daniel Smith, and then some other stuff. Yeah, and also like while I'm hearing everything, I figured I should address this. Was last stream having a little bit of fun and everything, and I probably said some stuff I probably shouldn't have said when playing a character and everything. So for that, I apologize. It's probably wasn't the right thing for me to do. It was not the best look for me. But anyways, let's jump into the healthcare system.
You've been looking into some new rules for Canadian travelers to consider. So, what more can you tell us?
Well, yes, Happy New Year.
So yeah, China is currently like having huge spikes within within COVID, and people who are expected to be traveling to China and everything, the federal government is recommending that uh, you have a negative test for tourists in China coming over, and as well as having a negative COVID test when returning as well. So yeah, it's honestly kind of gross that um all that's happening and everything. So I mean, like if China would have just had like the non-zero COVID policy, like if they didn't have that, I think that they would be in a very very better place, considering that it's going to inevitably disrupt supply chains and affect the global market, which is not going to have good um it's not going to look good for the capitalist class. So yeah, it's just going to end up hurting the global economy even more due to our over reliance on China for manufacturing and stuff like that as well. Um, so yeah, let's
And
continue.
starting on Thursday, January 5th, anyone traveling from China, Hong Kong, or Macau will have to provide a negative COVID test prior to their departure. Now, the test has to be taken no more than 2 days before they leave, and it's for anyone aged 2 or up, regardless of their nationality or their vaccine status. Now, this is a temporary measure brought in for the next 30 days, and it comes in response to the surge in cases we're seeing in China and the lack of data around variants and what's going on there. Now, China has previously been criticized for not being forthcoming about information regarding the virus, especially since it started in 2020. And Canada is not the only country bringing in these measures. We're also seeing similar measures coming in from
I mean, but to be fair, though, initially China did actually handle COVID a lot better than what the West did, especially America. So it's idiotic. Like, I do agree that, you know, they should have taken more preventative measures when it came down to the when it came down to like getting vaccines and everything. But they did handle things better in comparison to the West has, excluding like the last couple months and everything, because their zero COVID policy, like, to me, was just completely ridiculous. Like, people are gonna get COVID regardless, right? So yeah, and like, speaking like relatively as a after a post-COVID world, like, it's still like silly to me that we're still having problems within supply chains because some governments not taking the necessary steps in order to protect their citizens. Like, I believe China, for the most part, has done fairly good when it comes down to that stuff, but when it comes to like actually making or taking the necessary steps for COVID, I think as of late it's been incredibly disastrous. But like for other things, it's been a lot better. Just overall, it's just like one misstep that they took, in my opinion.
Japan, Taiwan, Italy, the US, South Korea, and India.
And what's been the reaction to the testing rules?
Well, BC's health minister is praising these moves, saying that they are a good step forward for this temporary measure. Now,
I mean, yeah, of course. Like, we don't, understandably, we don't want the this new variant spreading to, you know, to other parts of the world, right? You know, with considering that we had Omicron come from, I believe it was South Africa, the Delta variant coming from Italy, I believe it was, and like, I don't know which variant is currently popping off in China, but we don't want this variant, you know, spreading as well. So yeah, I completely agree. I think that these temporary measures are perfectly reasonable.
She also says that Vancouver's International Airport is piloting a program testing wastewater to keep an eye on variants and keep an eye on those levels. It's a similar measure being done at Toronto Pearson International Airport right now. But while BC's health minister is praising this, some doctors are not, calling this a performative measure in that it won't really make much of an impact on people's safety. Take a listen.
You have to ask yourself, what's the goal of a policy like this? Is this to really prevent COVID from entering Canada? We've got plenty of COVID, thank you very much, so it's not really going to do much from that standpoint. Is this going to prevent the introduction of potential variants of concern?
I mean, yeah, he is right. We do have COVID within Canada right now. Like, look at the current system, or look at what's currently going on with the healthcare system. It's being overrun with influenza, RSV, and COVID for in children and everything, and I imagine others as well. you know, it just is a different variant of COVID for sure. And yeah, like I do think that there is like potentially like some racial biases within that for sure, but it's hard to say.
Concern? No, we know that targeted travel restrictions and travel measures like this don't do that. We've seen that already with the Alpha variant that emerged in the United Kingdom, with the Delta variant that emerged in India, with the Omicron
It's
variant
India.
that emerged in several countries in Southern Africa. So, you know, these policies don't really do a whole heck of a lot, unfortunately.
So as we said, these policies are going to be in place for the next 30 days, so we'll see where things go from there.
Okay.
I do think that it is a fairly reactive or reactionary approach, though, right? Because, you know, we saw the exact same thing pop off when COVID was first starting off, and America took like these measures for starting off, and like, yeah, it's just completely ridiculous.
Okay. Gabriella, thank you for this.
Thank you.
So yeah, the like I had mentioned earlier, Quebec's ER braced for a terrible overflow or overcrowding of patients due to the holiday season. It's a new year, but Quebec's emergency rooms are still dealing with the same problems. Overcrowding, staff shortages, and sicker patients have been crippling emergency rooms across the province for months. Following a period of holiday celebrations, the first in 3 years without strict public health rules, healthcare workers say the situation will worsen before it improves, which, you know, we've seen we've seen healthcare workers say that, you know, after the last couple of years, right? So I can't really say that I'm surprised that this would come out. We would like to be wrong, but unfortunately we got to be prepared for the worst, said Dr. Judy Morris, head of Quebec's Association of Emergency Physicians. Notorious for broken bones, respiratory viruses, and heart attacks included induced by shoveling January and February, sent emergency room capacity levels surging year after year, said Morris. But with most hospitals across the province already operating at more than 100% capacity, and new variants of COVID-19 adding to that list of viruses, she fears the looming surge could break the short-staffed healthcare system. Which, yeah, I completely agree. Like, she's right on that, because, you know, like Quebec, like most other provinces, have not been actively trying to like prevent stuff like this from happening and keeping their medical professionals or just medical workers in general around, right? As well as, you know, not investing into the healthcare system. Like we've seen this exact thing happen within Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, BC. Like there's so many. It's not surprising in the slightest, right? We've already been overcrowded. We've been already stretched thin. The whole system lacks room for patients, she said. On Tuesday morning, Montreal's Lakeshore General Hospital emergency room was operating at 210% capacity, which is not uncommon. Not an uncommon occurrence these days, according to ER nurse Nathan Friedland. I mean, that's just a little bit crazy, right? Like, that seems way too high. I would call it a disaster, said Freeland. Said Freeland of the situation at the West Island Hospital. He said patients are showing up even sicker than usual due to blockages in primary care throughout the pandemic, which is not surprising. You have 2 years where people don't go to the doctor, 2 years where their health problems got worse, 2 years when they said when they weren't treated for cancer, he said. It's going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better. Logo, it looks like some form of right-wing logo, I'm not gonna lie. It has to be, right? I don't know. It definitely seems like it. As of Tuesday morning, the average opacity rate in emergency rooms across Montreal was 113%. It was 126% across Quebec. In Montreal, the most overcrowded hospitals included Santa Cabrini, Lakeshore General, Jewish General, Montreal General, and Royal Victoria. But Friedland said the figures don't represent the number of people waiting to be triaged. If you don't get a stretcher, you're going to you go back in the waiting room and you're not on the count, he said. In October, the Quebec government established a crisis unit to help manage the overflow of patients in emergency rooms. Following the unit's recommendations, the health ministry put in place some new measures, including opening 5 clinics run by nurse practitioners and expanding the 811 of Saint Line for pre-district services province-wide. While healthcare workers say these measures will help with waiting traffic room, they won't necessarily alleviate the overcapacity on stretchers. Dr. Kristen Torata, the Associate Emergency Department Chief at the McGill University Health Center, said an ideal solution would be more hospital beds. Without them, emergency room nurses are being forced to look after people on stretchers who would otherwise be up on a floor being taken care of by ward nurses. Everyone's busy. It's just the backlog always happens through the emergency departments, so that's why it may take longer for our nurses to come see you to give you the pain medication, why the physicians may have more trouble seeing you. It's often hard when we're dealing with hallway medicine, he said. The Health Ministry's crisis unit also released an overcapacity plan, which included a list of directives adopted by hospitals back in early December. Wonder if it was actually adopted, though, is the thing. Similar to Tuarta's proposed solution. One of the directives involved redistributing the pressures of hospitals' ER on and their wards, having those wards accommodate more patients. Another strategy involved having better and more timely access to radiology and consultants, including extending hours of availability. Morris says putting a little bit of pressure on wards will make a big difference for the ERs. But she says the question remains whether the hospitals will actually implement these recommendations. We need hospitals and the whole healthcare system to pretty much to come together and work on a plan. Plan to help us out, she said. Which, yeah, it definitely seems like they're not doing that, right? And if they're not going to be taking action to alleviate some of the pressures that are within the ER ward, it's just not going to happen, right? As many Montrealers cherish one more day of relaxation before heading back to work, already tired healthcare professionals are fearing tough times ahead in the province's emergency rooms. I think this New Year's is going to be like a catastrophe, said Maylene Ganick, a nurse who heads the what? Montreal West Nurses Union? I hope I'm saying that right. God damn, bro. I'm terrible with names. Well, last year's New Year's Eve, Quebec was under curfew. This year, parties were in full swing. People are finally able to see their loved ones during holidays. We weren't allowed to do that last year, said Dr. Kristen Coarta, McGill University Health Center Associate Emergency Department Chief. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are going to be sick, hopefully not sick enough to end up hospitalized, but certainly we're going to see an increase in the number of viral illnesses. Which, yeah, we're definitely going to be doing so. Emergency departments are already busy. The Jewish General Hospital was at 175% capacity Monday afternoon. Santa Carbrini was at 166%. Royal Victoria and Montreal General were both at 155%, and the Lakeshore was at 139%, according to hospital data. Ganick works at the Surrey Hospital in Valleyfield, where they were at over 200% capacity on Monday. Early year after New Year's, it's already like a lot of people are getting sick. I think this year is going to be worse because we don't have enough staff to provide healthcare, she said. I wonder why they don't have enough healthcare staff to to take care of people who are getting sick. I wonder why that is. Tuarta, who spoke Global News from Montreal General Hospital, said he thinks staff members will need to work even harder. Oh yeah, great. Just have the hospital staff who are incredibly overworked already and already facing burnout to work even harder. Yeah, that's great. Everybody's going to be a little bit more, and it's tough because everyone's going to have to do a little bit more, and it's tough because we've all been in a marathon that's now close to 3 years long, he said. He said throughout flu, COVID, and RSV cases are starting to lower, they're still putting a strain on the system, on the health system. Which, yeah, definitely. People are also showing up with other problems requiring administration or admission, but space is limited, so more pressure falls on emergency rooms. During the pandemic, people have unfortunately not had the greatest access to healthcare, and now that some of these problems have been compounded and they're coming in quite sick, requiring admission, and those admissions are backflowing to the emergency department, Tuarta explained. He says the decrease in respiratory viruses has eased some of the pressure on children's hospitals, but he doesn't think the adult hospitals will see much relief. Unfortunately, in the adult population, there's just not viral illness. There's also those chronic diseases, so I don't expect to see something similar in our departments, he told Global News. Tuarta says if you have an emergency, go to the ER. If your health problem is less pressing, call your family doctor or find a local clinic on the government website. Yannick, the nurse, says authorities need to do more to keep nurses from leaving the public system to work in private medical practices. I mean, the main problem here, right, is that they're doing this on purpose, right? They're undermining the public option so that companies can take over the healthcare system, like, say, TELUS, for example, right? Now, the big thing is that oftentimes they'll have, like, friends that are, or like, politicians will have friends that are in the, trying to privatize the healthcare system, or, or, you know, they're getting massive payouts from private companies in order to soften it, right? The main issue with this is that it's not going to solve the problem, right? It's just going to make the problem worse, because when it comes to the healthcare incentive, all you need to do is just look at America. Look at how terrible their fucking healthcare system is, where like 60%, at least 60% of Americans who are in debt is due to medical, right? That's also not going into the whole fact of like the profit motive, because like let's be honest with ourselves. You think in like a rural area in like Saskatchewan that only has one hospital is, you know, going to keep their healthcare or keep that hospital open? No, of course not, because they're in a business incentive it doesn't pay to keep it open because it will be losing money, right? Which sucks, because generally speaking, like, it will be mostly rural areas as well as poor areas Sometimes there's overlap within that for sure, but those are the places that are going to be losing out on healthcare. Like it solves nothing. It just makes just makes everything worse. In oh fuck. Uh, let's see here. In say, oh, I don't know. Say in Missouri, for example, in middle of nowhere, with their one healthcare or with their one hospital within like sometimes even 100 miles, there's going to be they're going to close that hospital down and put more strain on the healthcare system as is, right? Because they won't be able to go into that healthcare system in order to you know, have it like they had an emergency at like work, right? Like say, I don't know, they cut off their finger and everything, or you know, when another illness comes up that no one expects, it's just going to cause more problems than it solves, right? Like, and we're seeing the exact same thing here, and it's infuriating. Like it's terrible. There is also this that I want to go over. More money is a must, but healthcare delivery also needs a major rethink, doctors say. As the premiers and the federal government continue to battle over healthcare funding, leading doctors and experts say that while more government money is needed, the way healthcare is delivered in Canada needs to change. I don't necessarily disagree. We have plenty of surplus in the provincial pot for healthcare. The thing is that they're not spending that money on healthcare, if at all. Right? We've talked about this last time. If I swear to God, if this article says that we need to privatize healthcare, I'm going to fucking lose my mind. The issue is determining the national conversation now, as patients find themselves let down by a shortage of doctors and nurses, overwhelmed pediatric hospitals, and a backlog in necessary but elective surgeries. The Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, CHES, or CHEO, or CHO, recently had to accept staffing help from the Canadian Red Cross as it struggles with a surge in hospitalizations caused by respiratory viruses like influenza, RSV, and COVID-19. Alex Munter, CHO's CEO, said the hospital has just experienced its busiest May, June, July, September, October, and November in its 50-year history. Alberta's Children's Hospital in Calgary is facing a similar situation. It set up a heated trailer next to its emergency room as it continues to operate beyond 100% capacity. We are seeing a greater number of children significantly unwell, requiring hospitalization at a given time in a short period. than we have probably ever seen before, said Dr. Stephen Friedman, professor of the pediatrics at the University of Calgary. Our biggest challenge in our emergency right now in Calgary is often space to see kids. We've started therapy, but there's nowhere for them to move. So they're stuck in the emergency department for 24 to 36 hours. Experts say that hospitals are family practices in Canada were built to operate at almost full capacity all the time. When the system experiences spikes in needs, doctors and nurses simply work longer hours to meet the demand. But the system was operating over peak capacity for a long time during the pandemic, and doctors and nurses start to burn out. It's not just that. That is a part in it. That's not the only reason why there's been a shortage of doctors and nurses. The Canadian Medical Association, CMA, surveyed its members and found 53% of doctors were reporting burnout in 2021, compared to the 30% in 2017. A similar survey of 5,200 nurses by the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario found more than 75% of nurses qualified as burnt out in 2021. Which, yeah, it is a problem for sure. It's like driving around with only $5 in the gas tank, knowing that winter's here, knowing that a day that's minus 30 is just around the corner, but then not changing the approach and idling and letting gas run out, said CMA's president, Dr. Aleka Lafontaine. Dr. Lafontaine said that if doctors and nurses continue to burn out on the job, the system will deteriorate further. Which, yeah, that is true. There are other aspects to that as well. But burnout is definitely one of the problems. Canada has a well-documented shortage of doctors and nurses, a problem made worse, doctors say, by the increasing administrative burden they face. The CMA says family physicians work on average of about 52 hours per week, but only spend 36 hours taking care of patients. The rest of their time is taken up by administration and other non-medical tasks. Which, with what we saw last time when it came, how we should be doing healthcare within Canada, I do think that's how we should be restructuring our medical system. Because don't get me wrong, our medical system is dog shit and everything, and it definitely needs an upgrade, but it's so much better than the fucking American system that these idiotic premiers are trying to push for, right? And it's infuriating, and people have actually been protesting it. It's just not covered by the news because it's unpopular. It would make the news also look fairly bad, considering that they have huge incentives to not cover that, right? The same is true of other doctors. Medical residents work about 66 hours a week, but see patients for 48. Specialists work more than 53 hours per week, but see patients just for 36. Surgeons work almost 62 hours a week, but only see patients about 46. It has nothing to do with their individual resiliency or high capacity or compensation or commitment to patient care, but it's because we find ourselves in a healthcare system that's broken, said Dr. Rose Zacharias, president of the Ontario Medical Association. So yeah, a lot of things definitely contribute to this. The lack of funding that we're seeing from, for the most part, conservative premiers not investing the funds that they give to the healthcare system by trying to undermine it and privatize it, as well as a shift towards trying to privatize the healthcare system. Doctors and nurses getting burnt out, medical staff not being paid enough in a vast majority of provinces, and are leaving to other provinces in order to try and make more money until that inevitably happens to them there as well. Like, there's a whole slew of problems that could easily be solved tomorrow, but we don't want to do that because it costs too much money or whatever the fuck. Despite the fact that, all these provinces, for the most part being conservative provinces, being like, oh, well, we don't have enough money to fund all this shit, whilst at the bare minimum we're sitting on like $6 billion in unspent healthcare funds. Like, it's ridiculous, right? Because we're seeing it like all across the country. It's no fucking coincidence that it's happening all at the same time in pretty much every single conservative province. Like, no shot, right? Dr. Zacharias said the administrative burden has grown astronomically, expanding beyond paperwork to argue for beds in hospitals and arranging emergency transfers. And yeah, that's another thing. Like, another thing is that, we're short-staffed when it comes to healthcare because, like, let's be honest with ourselves. Like, a lot of people see how fucking healthcare professionals are being treated, and they don't want to fucking become healthcare staff, even though I'm sure that a lot of people that would be like really beneficial towards the system would either don't have enough money to do so, or like to go to school for it and everything, or don't want to get into it now because of they see how the provinces are treating the staff, right? And not spending money that was given to the provinces for health, for improving the healthcare system, but just flat out don't. The Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions says its members are similarly streamed into administrative tasks that require them to manage staff, arrange transfers, fill out reports, and even perform some cleaning duties. Which I think is ridiculous. To my knowledge, I don't think that's their jobs. The reason why we're in the situation we're in, I think, is because over the past couple decades, we've been really focused on cost cutting as a solution for our healthcare problems. Dr. Lanfontier said. Which, yeah, he is 100% right. 100% right. Because we're too busy trying to run the healthcare system like it's a business. It's not a business, okay? Like, the healthcare system is designed to have quality care, or to provide quality care to, you know, as well as to provide preventative care and look after and make sure that the patients have the best possible care that they can. Not this shit. Like, cost cutting is going to solve absolutely nothing. Because, again, going back to the American way of doing healthcare, which is incredibly exploitative and incredibly predatory, is ridiculous, right? Because if we did the American style here, it would be like just awful. Because, for example, let's compare our system, or how it's supposed to be running, to the American system, right? So let's say we have $10 for both systems, right? And in our system, that entire $10 will go to the quality care, you know, getting beds, medicine, whatever, right? As well as the equipment being used. When you use the American system, they're going to be trying to make profit, right? Regardless of however small. So they'll, you know, they'll cut costs somewhere in order to say, like, they'll spend, like, I don't know, say $7 of that and, you know, make $3 of profit. So the quality care will be worse, the equipment will be older, you know, the medicine quality would go down. Like, there's a whole different slew of different aspects that could cause worse quality care and make them a profit, right? Which, no, like, in this hypothetical, like, that entire $10 should be going to the cost of care, not, you know, like a little bit of cost of care and then trying to make profit off of it. Which is why I despise the way that America does healthcare, and it's really infuriating to me that a lot of provinces within our fucking country are trying to do the American style process, despite the fact that we already have a two-tiered medical system within our country. Like, you know, say chiropractic, which I don't even fucking believe in. I think chiropractic is just a fucking joke. Like, I believe it's just a pseudoscience. You know, dental, like, why isn't that free? Physiotherapy, I don't understand why that's not free. You know, medication, there's prescriptions, there's just so much that we should be doing, but unfortunately a lot of these fucking morons who are running the provinces are too busy with cost cutting and running the fucking healthcare system like a business, which is how we end up with the fucking surplus of unspent medical funding. Like, we could have a far better medical system than, you know, actually fucking making the quality care worse, making our nurses, doctors, pediatricians, whoever leave the province. You know, there's just no reason for it outside of these greedy fuckers wanting to make as much money as possible and not actually spend the funding that they're giving to actually, you know, improve the quality of care, because they don't give a shit. Like, let's be honest with ourselves, they don't give a shit. Because if they are actually successful within privatizing the healthcare system, it's not going to affect them one bit. Why the fuck would they care, right? Like, their quality of care won't change, but for the most part, a vast majority of Canadians will, the quality of care will change, and will be exactly where fucking America is. And, you know, understandably, when, you know, Canadians hear American style healthcare, they do not get too happy about that. Outside of like your fucking dumbass conservatives or libertarians, like, who the fuck cares about them though? Like, they're a small minority of people that actually want that, right? Like, I'm talking like hardcore libertarian, or just like libertarians in general, or like hardcore conservative. Like, it's idiotic. Like, even in a very conservative area where I live, if I say, you know, the provincial government is trying to run, or trying to make the healthcare system, you know, a like American style, even like conservatives within my area aren't really too happy about that, because they see how dog shit the American style of healthcare is, and how not good it is. Provincial and territorial governments have implemented approaches that have really focused on the cost per volume of procedures and appointments, and as a result, we've lost a lot of bandwidth that we used to have when it came to spikes in demand. While these problems persist, the debate between the premiers and the federal government has been largely about money, which is really fucking funny. Like, I don't necessarily disagree. I do think that we should be spending more money for the healthcare system, for sure. But it's really infuriating when we have a surplus of unspent medical funds. Like, I'm like talking billions per province that are bitching and moaning about not having enough money for the medical system, or for the healthcare system. It's not like we don't have the money. We have the money for it. Billions of dollars for it. But they're just not willing to actually fucking spend it on the healthcare system. Canadian premiers say the federal government is only paying 22% of the cost of providing healthcare. They want that boosted to 35%, an increase of $28 billion to the $45.2 billion Health Canada transfer CHT started this year. And for the CHT to increase by 6% annually after that. The federal government said that while the CHT only covers 22% of the healthcare costs, taxation powers transferred to the provinces in 1977 to pay for healthcare and funding for things like mental health services, home care, and long-term care, bringing the federal government's share up to as much as 38.5%. Federal Health Minister Yves Duclos said he is willing to bring more money into the system, but only if provinces agree to reform to improve, or only if the provinces agree to system reforms to improve outcomes, which we already know is not going to happen. Because as we saw when they asked Justin Trudeau for money, they said, He said, "We are willing to give you more money, but we want you to uphold a deal with us, being that all this money that we're giving you is going to be going. We need to be sure that you're gonna. Excuse me. We need to be sure that this money is actually going to be spent on the healthcare system instead of having a surplus," which I don't disagree with him on. Like, let's be honest. Like, it's one thing that I can actually agree with the prime minister on. Right? It's something that, you know, should be done. And, you know, I think him putting his foot down, being like, we're not going to be giving you this money unless you are actually willing to agree to my terms and conditions, is, you know, a good thing. Like, there's no reason that should not be, like, there's no reason why that should have to be implemented, right? Like, and then they're crying about, like, receiving money with no strings attached, but we've seen time and time again when that happens, you know, nothing gets done. And it's infuriating. Doctors and administrative workers in the healthcare system say that reform is essential if any new money is going to improve delivery, and they have plenty of ideas that changes that need to be made. In addition of administrative staff specifically tasked with non-medical responsibilities could help, but that won't happen without long-term predictable funding that could come from a new health deal between the provinces and the federal government, Hunter said. 5 years ago, we could just put a 1-year contract. People would take it and then hope to be able to find a full-time job after that. That's not possible anymore, he said. We'll get 0 applicants for those kind of positions. If we have to hire people permanently, and a lot of the funding that comes and goes into the healthcare system is temporary money. The federal government and the provinces have agreed to streamline how health information is shared in Canada, but doctors say that effort needs to speed up to take some of the administrative burden off the doctors and nurses. Our digital interrogation is very poor, said Dr. Zacharias. Doctors documented inside software that doesn't communicate with hospital software or pharmacist software or COVID-19 vaccine or vaccination software. Doctors are spreading a lot of time gathering the relevant data, and this is incredibly burdensome, and that burden has grown over time. Experts say that while it takes years to reserve a shortage of doctors and nurses, quickly recognizing the foreign credentials of doctors and nurses already living in Canada would boost their numbers now without poaching healthcare workers from abroad. Like, I just get so frustrated when talking about the healthcare system now because of these fucking idiot conservative premiers deliberately attacking the healthcare system in order to make it fucking worse. Like, it's really ridiculous to me that this is happening, and that people have to suffer and die because these fucking idiots want to cut corners in order to make more to run it like a business, because they think that they're like a fucking skilled business owner. Like, it's so infuriating. I think that we should just kick all these fucking corrupt premiers out of their fucking positions and not allow them to run ever again, because they're just toying with people's lives, right? We do have hundreds of doctors in Ontario that we have trained elsewhere that don't have a Canadian license, said Dr. Zacharias. If we were able to put these physicians through those 3 months of practice ready assignments or assessments, we could see hundreds of new doctors in the system by the spring. Which, yeah, you know what? I think that's a good idea. Like, sorry for me to listening to doctors who, you know, understand the fucking healthcare system better than these old white idiots who have no idea how healthcare actually works within this fucking country. Like, it's infuriating. Fixing the problem in the long term is harder because it takes about 5 to 10 years to train a doctor in Canada. That timeline demands long-term predictable funding, doctors say. I mean, I think when it comes down to that, I think just like a lot of the problems that we see within like our healthcare system and everything, like when it comes to healthcare, like hands down, Cuba has by far the best healthcare in the Western Hemisphere. So I think we should be taking Cuba's approach to that. And when it comes to education, I think we should be taking the Swedish approach to it. Republicans make you super farty. True. Republicans fucking suck. To be fair, though, the Democrats are also shit too. We shouldn't just be thinking now. We should be thinking, okay, what's going on? What's going to be our capacity need in 10, 20 years? And we should build now from 10 years from the future, and in 10 years we should be planning for the 10 years down the road again, said Friedman. Yeah, we don't actually, you know, think about that. We only think about the short term, which is idiotic. The burden on the hospital system could be significantly reduced, doctors say, if more health care services were delivered outside of a hospital setting. Sure, I guess it would alleviate some burden. Increasing the delivery on non-hospital health services would require additional family doctors with lower administrative burdens. It also would require changes to how family practices work, doctors say. I mean, yeah, that's... I mean, like, we just need a completely restructuring of our healthcare system entirely, though. One way is to get doctors into teams of other allied healthcare professionals, doctors working alongside nurse practitioners, physician assistants, psychotherapists, social workers, discharge coordinators, pharmacists, and rehab therapists, said Dr. Zacharias. I completely agree with that. I do not agree with anything he said here. That is 100% true. And on the episode of Marketplace that we had watched, you know, it's something that we should have definitely moved towards, for sure. Um, all these allied healthcare professionals on the team of a physician could really offload a lot of responsibility that often patients look to other family the family doctor for. Improved healthcare at the primary level, doctors say, would mean fewer people being sent to the hospital because of their sheer volume of work family doctors do. The Alberta College of Family Physicians said that in 2022, 70% of all healthcare visits in Canada were to a family doctor. Doctors say that moving exclusive surgeries out of hospitals and into surgical centers would also help free up the operating rooms for more urgent surgeries. That they also say that moving palliative palliative care out of hospital settings would free up beds and staff. Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the main issue is that this could easily be ripe for privatization, right? Like, it's kind of infuriating. Hospitals are filled with people who no longer need acute hospital attention, but they're there because they can't be safely discharged into the community or any long-term care or hospice bed, said Dr. Zacharias. An investment in the community care, palliative care, home care would help alleviate the strain on hospitals. Which, yeah, he's not wrong on. That would definitely help for sure. We've seen that work in some instances in Ontario on Marketplace. Like, it was incredibly good that I think we should be striving towards for sure. Solving Canada's healthcare crisis, experts say, requires more than just money. It requires a new way of doing things. I do feel like crisis management, cash influxes, I mean, no one's going to turn down that, but I think the bigger picture is we need to talk about what do we need for the future, said Friedman. Yeah, I mean, for sure. Our healthcare system is complete dog shit, but it's way better than like America's system. So yeah, let's move on to Lula. So Brazil has now confirmed that Lula is sworn in and going to be Brazil's next president, which is super exciting. I'm really glad that Lula won.
International news, Brazil inaugurated a new president today. The swearing-in ceremony for leftist Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was held under tight security. That was due.
The main thing is I hope he doesn't get CIA'd. That's the big thing. Like, I love Lula, but I have a feeling that he could be CIA'd.
The threats of violence by supporters of his far-right predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro. Lula narrowly won his third presidential term in October, and he faces some major challenges. CBC's JP Tasker
Does
has
fascism
more on
lost
the return
brothers?
to power of a very familiar face in Brazilian politics.
Yeah, like, he's been president before, right? For like 4 terms, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's so familiar, he's only known by one name, Lula, in Brazil. He has taken over the presidential sash. It's a triumphant return to an office for, his third term. That's unprecedented in Brazil. He's been away from it for more than a decade. Road to power, only a few...
Yeah, he was arrested for corruption charges, which didn't hold any water. Like, it's crazy to me that that they tried to do that, despite the fact that Bolsonaro was just complete dog shit.
Few months ago, really taking on Jair Bolsonaro, as you mentioned, a real far-right controversial character. Lula himself is a leftist. He started out as a trade unionist. He's been involved in the Workers' Party for quite literally decades. I was looking through some...
And guess what? A lot of Brazilians actually like Lula, so there's that as well.
Tape today, you can see him running for office in the 70s. He is certainly a very important figure in Brazil, and he rode to victory, again, based on his support among the working classes and the impoverished people of the country, largely in the north. And, under his past leadership...
So, like, the thing with Lula is, like, sure, he had, like, the fucking fraud scandal or whatever the fuck he was falsely imprisoned for, despite the fact that Bolsonaro was, like, doing a lot worse shit than Lula has, like, ever done. And, Lula actually made, like, Brazil significantly better for the Brazilian people, right? And ever since Bolsonaro took over and was like all buddy with like corporate America and shit, like it's just made things incredibly terrible in Brazil. So I'm gonna be keeping an eye on what Lula does for sure.
The economy was booming, and now it's really in a fragile state, Natasha, and he really steps in a tenuous time for Brazil. The nasty election campaign that had him take on Bolsonaro really divided the country. Bolsonaro, deeply polarizing, but he does have legions of supporters, and he has refused to concede defeat in that election campaign. And some of his voters have...
Where have I heard this before? I've heard this somewhere. I've heard this somewhere before. I still hear it. Where have I heard it before?
Said without evidence that the election was rigged. That's not unlike another president here in the United States. There have been riots all across the country, particularly in the capital of Brasilia. 4 people have been arrested, accused of trying to oust Lula in a coup. Police were out today. The bomb squad, they were finding some...
Wait, they already tried to fucking overthrow Lula? Bro, right-wingers are insane.
Makeshift explosives scattered around the capital there where Lula was set to be sworn in. So it is a very tense time in the country, and a lot of people are very anxious, worried about the future of the country, and hopeful, at least Lula's supporters, hopeful that he can turn things around.
Well, let's talk about that, because you've got this context and this backdrop of all of this conflict going on. And, there's so many distractions, one might say, but Lula has really clarified what his agenda is. So what are some of the top priorities for him?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of his supporters were happy to see him elected because they figured it was kind of a triumph of democracy over fascism. Bolsonaro was...
unlike Italy.
A very totalitarian leader, if you will. And one of the policies that was really controversial was his approach to the environment. And Lula has said that safeguarding Brazil's rainforests may well be the defining issue of his presidency. He's promised to rein in...
I mean, yeah, Bolsonaro opened up a fuck ton of protected land to, fucking farmers and shit for, like, the beef industry or whatever the fuck. Like, as well as, like, housing development or some other bullshit like that. Like, he was just fucking awful, man.
Illegal loggers, miners, land grabbers, because Bolsonaro really scaled back and weakened environmental protections in the world's largest rainforest.
And companies love that. Like, they loved it incredibly much. Like, it's... Yeah.
opened up indigenous lands to economic development. The deforestation rate was massive under his tenure. So a lot of climate activists in Brazil and around the world, frankly, are hoping that Lula sticks to his promises to repeal some of those policies.
I mean, yeah, it's Lula. Of course he's going to stick to his guns. Like, why wouldn't he? Like, he's done it before. He's most likely going to do it again.
But there will be opposition, Natasha. Bolsonaro won 5 of the 9 states in the Brazilian Amazon because there are people in that region that are fearful this environmental push will tank the economy, will put a lot of people out of work.
CBC's JP Tasker reporting from Washington.
In front of a crushing crowd of some 300,000 people, the man universally known as Lula assumed the presidency of a country in turmoil.
Viva a democracia! Viva o povo brasileiro!
His conviction on corruption charges overturned last year, returning for an unprecedented third term. An astonishing comeback.
Oh, I guess it was only 3 terms. But like, Lula is loved in Brazil, so it was kind of scary that Bolsonaro had as much support as he did, but I think that Lula is going to make Brazil much better than what it currently is.
Brazilian leftists. This is a victory of democracy against fascism, says this Lula supporter. The carnival-like party on New Year's Day comes against a tense backdrop. Brazil is deeply divided after a nasty election campaign that saw Lula take on his far-right...
I mean, like, most fucking countries are, like, deeply divided or whatever the fuck mainstream media is gonna push. Like, you could say that about, like, literally any fucking country on this planet. Like, you could say that we're divided, you could say that America's divided, you can say that fucking China's divided or some shit under, like, the right narratives. Like, it's idiotic. Like, bro, you could literally even say that fucking Cuba is divided, despite the fact that in Cuba, the government has an approval rating of, like, over, what, 65% at least?
Predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro, a polarizing figure with diehard supporters.
Also dog shit.
Some of them
Bro. I've never seen more fucking cop looking motherfuckers in my entire life. Like, at least half of these guys have to be cops, right? Like, no shot. Like, look at how much fucking like, they're fucking wearing the skin tight Oakleys, my guy. Like, it's wild how many of these idiots are wearing that shit. It's so funny.
Some of them weeping as Lula took over.
I saw remember when we saw the exact same thing when fucking Joe Brandon won the presidency over Trump? Like, we saw the exact same thing by the fucking Republicans in America.
Bolsonaro has refused to concede defeat.
Where have I heard that
I
before?
asked myself where I went wrong and what I could have done better, he said in a message to supporters. Some of his voters have said without evidence the election was rigged. There have been riots in the capital. 4 have been arrested, accused of staging a coup to oust Lula. That's put police on edge. Bolsonaro himself was not part of the handoff. He's in Orlando, Florida. Lula's followers back home are...
Oh god, of course he's in Florida. That's where all fucking old white people go to like die. Is like fucking Florida. Honestly, like, Americans, I'm gonna get real with you. Just wall off Florida. Like, just put all your insane hogs that are like over the age of, like, I don't know, 30 in Florida and just wall it off. Let them have everything there. Like, tear down the wall that you've been building at the southern border and just wall off Florida. Let all those white conservatives have fun in Florida. I don't give a shit about Disneyland either. Let them have it. Let them have it. Like, just gonna be real with you. Hell, we'll even give you hours if you want. We'll give you our old white conservatives too.
Happy to see him go.
As pessoas estão divulgando a questão do
I am only finding cheerful
pode ser
people,
externo
this
ou
woman
pode ser,
says.
mas aqui
So it really is a government of national reconciliation, national union, national reconstruction of Brazil's democracy.
The country's economy is in freefall and the streets are plagued by violence. This Brazilian political expert says Lula faces the fight of his life.
Because the country faces a serious political crisis, but also economic, social crisis. So if things start improving, and the challenge, of course, is going to have to deliver fast.
Climate activists in particular have high hopes for Lula. He's promised to save the Amazon rainforest from further development. JP Tasker, CBC News.
Yeah, like it was
Washington.
mostly sold off to like logging companies and farmers for like, you know, cattle and shit. What's that? Oh, that's nothing. The veteran left-wing politician, widely known as Lula, also led the country between 2003 and 2010, and defeated Jair Bolsonaro in October's poll. In his first speech, Lula vowed he would to rebuild the country in terrible ruins. He declared the policies of his predecessor, who went to the U.S. on Friday to avoid the handover ceremony. A sea of Lula supporters gathered in front of Congress since early in the morning, decked out in the red color of his Workers' Party. They traveled to see their leader sworn in, but also for a celebration. More than 60 artists, including samba legend Martinho de Villa, were booked to perform on two giant stages dedicated to the national flag as part of a music festival dubbed Lula Pazu or Luza. Love has won over hate. Read one banner carried by a man dressed as Lula, complete with the president's stash or the presidential stash. I mean, okay. Brazil needed this change. This transformation, said another backer of the incoming leader as she queued for Sunday's festivities. Julian Barreto, who is from Lula's home state of Canada, Pernambuco, told the BBC that her country was a disaster previously. Lula and incoming Vice President Geraldo Elkman paraded through the city on an open-top convertible before proceeding to the Congress building, where the swearing-in occurred at the start of the formal inauguration ceremony. The men have spent the past days selecting their cabinet and appointing porters to key state-owned businesses. Shortly after being sworn in, Lula sought to install a sense of hope in the people of Brazil, who promised to rebuild the nation and make Brazil all of all for all. There were several instances when he got out his hanky. I fucking love that Oibrovs, man. He got out his hanky. His most emotional moment came when speaking to the Brazilian people after the swearing-in ceremony. He started sobbing when talking about those who beg at traffic lights, desperate for food. I mean, yeah, that's terrible. Probably not even Lula thought this day would ever come. A return to the top job after 2 decades, despite a spell in prison after being convicted of corruption. Those convictions were subsequently annulled in 2021. Much of his speech to Congress was about unity and reconciliation. The two words are crucial in such a deeply divided country, hit hard by the pandemic and hugely polarized politically. Lula knows that his ultimate change will be to convince those who feel he is a corrupt politician who belongs in jail, that he does not belong in the presidential palace again, and can be their leader too. Pledged to undo the legacy of his predecessor's government, which he had said involved depleting funds for education, health, and conservation for the Amazon rainforest. Huge cheers from those watching in Congress also promised to revoke Mr. Bolsonaro's controversial gun laws immediately. Which, yeah, that's a good thing. That's a very, very good thing. Lula went on to state that his government would be not motivated by a spirit of revenge, but that those who made mistakes would answer for their errors. In particular, he signaled out to Mr. Bolsonaro's COVID-19 policies, accusing him of causing a genocide of deaths in Brazil during the pandemic, which would need to be fully investigated. Yeah, get his ass, Lula. Get his ass. In another noted change of policy from the Bolsonaro administration, Marina Silva, one of Brazil's most known climate activists, was reappointed to head of the Environment and Climate Ministry. She will be expected to achieve Lula's pledge, which was repeated during his speech to reach zero deforestation in the Amazon by 2030. The atmosphere in Brasilia couldn't be more different from when Mr. Bolsonaro was in power. Lots of people were waving banners, wearing t-shirts with the words "Love conquers hate," a reference to the narrative many felt came from Mr. Bolsonaro. But diversity and inclusion, too, was a big part of today's inauguration, with Mr. Bolsonaro abandoning his final official duty by passing the presidential sash. It was left to Ini Souza, a rubbish picker, to do the honors. And standing next to Lula was an indigenous leader, a black boy, and disabled influencer. Black boy. Like, this kind of sounds a little bit racist. I'm not, like, I mean, I guess it's the BBC, but like, yeah, that's like this is good. I'm really glad that Lula's been sworn in and everything. In this country where racism is all too common, it was an important image that will endure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it's just kind of petty that fascists, when they lose to like a far superior option, they like do everything to deny or even like a non like superior option, like they'll do everything that they can do, or they'll try everything to stay in power and everything, and like not respect the rules, despite the fact that they think that rules are super fucking important and everything. Like, it's just silly. The state of Brasilia deployed 100% of its police force, around 8,000 officers, to the city amid fears that some supporters of Mr. Bolsonaro could seek to dispute proceedings. Which, yeah, that's a good call that they had made. One man was arrested trying to enter the area of the inauguration carrying a knife and fireworks earlier on Sunday. Brazil's military police said. I'm not surprised by that. Last week, authorities arrested a supporter of Mr. Bolsonaro who had allegedly placed explosives on a fuel truck near the airport in the capital on Christmas Eve. The man said he had hoped to sow chaos ahead of Lula's inauguration. And another supporter from the former leader had remained camped outside army headquarters, where they have been arguing urging the army to launch a coup. Police attempted to remove the demonstrator on Tuesday, but withdrew after they reacted violently. However, Mr. Bolsonaro has also condemned the protests against his defeat, urging his supporters to show we are different from the other side, to respect the norms of the Constitution, which is really fucking funny coming from Bolsonaro. Like, that is super funny. Like, come on, bro. Super funny coming from Bolsonaro. Brazilian markets delivered a withering verdict on leftist president Lizu Inacio Lula Salvi's first day in office on Monday, after he pledged to prioritize social issues and ordered a budget busting extension to a fuel tax exemption. Lula's decision to extend the fuel tax exemption, which will deprive the Treasury of 52.9 billion risas, or $13.4 billion a year in financial income, was a stringing rebuke of his finance minister, Bernardo Haddad, a Workers' Party loyalist who had said it would not be extended. Mr. Haddad, who is seeking to spell market fears that he might not maintain financial or fiscal discipline, took office on Monday, pledging to control spending. Quote, "We are not here for adventures," he said. Markets seemed unconvinced, which is not surprising. it the real fell 1.5% against the dollar in thin trading on the federal holiday in the United States. Sao Paulo's stock dropped 3.3% with financials and energy stocks weighing on the index. Brazil's state-run oil company Petrobras slid 6% after Lula signed a decree on Sunday extending the 60-day an exemption for fuels on federal taxes, a measure passed by his predecessor aimed at lowering their costs. In speeches delivered at his inauguration in Brasilia on Sunday, Lula promised that tackling hunger and poverty would be the hallmark of his third presidency after two previous stints running the country from 2003 to 2010. Financial analysts said the start of Lula's third presidency was the line which, with his campaign promises, he looked similar to earlier Worker Party policies that led to a deep recession. Lula narrowly defeated far-right former President Jair Bolsonaro in October, swinging South America's largest nation back on a left-wing track. On Monday, Lula instructed ministers to revoke steps to privatize state companies taken by the previous administration, including studies to sell oil companies, Petrobras, and the post office, and state broadcasting company EBC. On Sunday, he's signed a decree extending the exemption for fuels from federal taxes, and a measure passed by his predecessor aimed at lowering their costs that in the run-up to the election, but will have deprived the Treasury of 52.9 billion reais a year in financial income. The federal tax exemption for fuels will last 1 year for diesel and biodiesels and 2 months for gasoline and ethanol, a decree it published in the official Gazette showed on Monday. Gabriel Giorgio Arugi, Gracia, analyst Guide Investiments, said Lula's plan to increase social spending, expand the role of state banks, and abolish a constitutionally mandated spending cycling harked back to the worst days of the PT rule. The policy reminded us of Dilma Rousseff's government rather than Lula's, Mr. Gassier said, referring to Lula's handpicked successor who was impeached while in office. Her policies led to Brazil's worst recession since 1929. Lula, who lifted millions of Brazilians from poverty during his first 2 terms, criticized Mr. Bolsonaro for allowing hunger to return to Brazil, and wept during his speech to supporters on Sunday as he described how poverty had increased again. Lula kicks off his 3rd presidential term after persuading Congress to pass a one-year 170 billion reais increased social spending package in line with his campaign promises, which is good. He's doing it right away, and that is incredibly good. Like, increase the social spending is really good. The package ended up being bigger than expected, with potential repressions for public debt, sustainability, Banco BTG Actual said in a research note. Lula spent his first day in office meeting more than a dozen heads of state who had attended his inauguration. The meeting started with the King of Spain and continued with the South American presidents. Among them was leftist leader of Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, as well as representatives from Cuba and Venezuela. And Vice President Wang Xing of China. So terrible with names, bro. All right, so let's see what the CBC has to say about Lula winning.
Hey there, I'm Andrew Chang. Welcome to About That. Today, maybe one of the largest scale stories we have ever done.
Lula, let's go.
We don't often do stories of life and death on this program, but this one counts, I think. The Amazon is burning, like literally burning. And humanity is at something of a crossroads between 2 futures. One where the Amazon lives and one where the Amazon dies. Now, I remember...
With Lula, I honestly think it's going to live. Like, I honestly think it's going to live and actually could potentially regrow and be back to a state of repair compared to the disrepair that it's in currently.
When I was a kid, learning about the Amazon rainforest, it was a bit like learning about some mythical, magical kingdom far away.
I wonder if they're going to try and push the narrative that Lula is going to do more harm than Bolsonaro, despite the fact that Bolsonaro did significantly worse things than Lula could ever imagine to do, right?
Way that sounded, to be honest, just too fantastical to be real, right? It was in books, it was in cartoons and movies, and I always imagined some Indiana Jones type figure, cutting a swath through jungle vines with a machete in a place that was just absolutely teeming and buzzing with exotic life. It wasn't until much later that I learned more about why we have, for decades, been so infatuated with, what is, hands down, the largest and most biodiverse tracts of tropical rainforest in the world. Now, the Amazon is twice the size of India. 10% of the world's known species live there. It is the world's most varied biological reservoirs with 20% of the world's flowing fresh water. And it's a massive carbon sink. It's estimated that the plant life there has absorbed 123 billion tons of carbon, both above and below ground. But as I said, it's burning. There's evidence that some parts are emitting more CO2 than they store. The damage over the decades has been catastrophic. By some estimates, the Amazon has lost 20% of its forest cover in the last half century. And every year, just imagine, taking a parcel of rainforest about the size of Toronto and just wiping it out. But not once. Do it 10 or 20 times over. That's what's happening to the Amazon every year. I mean, just think about how much land that is, how many trees, how much other life.
Too much.
We're talking about here. And so today, the world is asking, who will save it? Now we can start to answer that question by looking at Brazil. 60% of the Amazon basin is in Brazil, and that country just wrapped up a tightly contested presidential election. The man hoping to cling to power, Jair Bolsonaro, a man who, by many accounts, has allowed the degradation and deforestation of the Amazon to continue. But the man who won the election, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, or people just call him Lula for short. Under his rule, the future of the Amazon could look very different. And so, to better understand why and how that is, I caught up with Jill English, CBC's international climate producer, who just recently returned from a trip to the Amazon, where she was trying to gain a better understanding of what's at stake. Take a look. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
We've known each other for like several years now.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever interviewed you before.
No, definitely not.
This is,
I don't think so. Yeah.
And
you've grilled me, but you've never.
I've grilled you off camera as we work together on stories.
Yes.
But it's taken you like hopping on a plane, not quite all the way around the world, but it must have felt like that all the way down south to Brazil.
Yeah, well, it was an adventure for sure. And Brazil's a lot further than I realized. Like, it took us like 20 hours to get there.
We went to the Brazilian Amazon to learn more about the world's biggest rainforest, because this amazing place impacts the climate everywhere. That's my teammate, international climate correspondent, Susan Ormiston, who is much less afraid of heights than me, it turns out. Part of our Amazonian adventure took us to a research camp. It was a trek. It was literally in the middle of the Amazon. But the scientists we went with drive this rugged road all the time.
That must have been a crazy trip, because there's also like the potential for danger, right?
Yeah.
When you go.
Yeah, well, in the summer, there was a British journalist and his guide who were actually killed doing similar, storytelling, environmental storytelling. Right. They were looking at illegal mining, and their bodies were found dismembered and buried in the forest.
Now, Jill and I didn't talk a whole lot about this specific case, but after we were done chatting, how could I not look it up, right? And so here we are, sure enough, 3 men charged in Brazil rainforest killings of Indigenous expert UK journalist Dom Phillips. Now, I'm kind of floored that I didn't actually remember that this happened, but apparently this particular area, this part of the Amazon rainforest, is known as a hotbed for illegal fishing and poaching, and so really
it is
the point that Jill was making about the risk of investigating illegal logging.
It's politically very contentious. Right now in Brazil, there's a real fight between preserving the forest and developing the forest. And so you've got a lot of farmers.
I mean, you can do both, right? Like, there are ways to do both. But, I don't know if a lot of these idiots who say that you can't are actually willing to actually, look into alternative methods to development, right?
Farmers and agribusiness people who want to continue to clear, and it's illegal what they're doing. And so it is something we had to take really seriously before we jumped on a plane and went into the jungle.
Sure, because like even in the preparation, you must be going through this balancing act in your mind of how ambitious can we be with the storytelling and who we talk to and where we go versus how judicious should we be about like not taking unnecessary risks and being safe.
Exactly. And it really all comes down to who's with you on the ground, because no one speaks English. So you're not even able to really pick up
Portuguese?
On those cues. I don't really speak Portuguese. I spent 4 months in Portugal once, and so
close enough.
Yeah.
It's like, was it like Will Nuff saying, was it Will Nuff or was it? I don't remember. It was like, all I remember was like, one of the guys on Ludwig's Local Money being like, you know what, I lived in Vietnam or whatever it was for like 3 weeks.
It's not nothing.
So I can speak.
No,
I can speak.
I could pick up on little
speak
things
that.
that were being discussed for sure.
Right.
But that's not enough to, you know, to make those kind of decisions on. So
you've really got to rely on local help that you can find to help kind of keep the journalistic train running when you're out.
Exactly. So in order that when you go to a place like this where you're not from there and you definitely need someone to help you kind of navigate interviews, translate for you, guide you around, find you a taxi.
Well, because they're trying to help you, but they also have to keep you safe, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, did you need bodyguards?
No, so that was part of the discussion as well. But part of my conversations with the local journalists and the fixers we were exploring working with was, is that a smart move? And everyone local said, not really.
Because what's the risk there? What's the downside?
Well, you might draw attention to yourself, right? If you're driving through a rural community and you've got bodyguards with you or more people with you, you might actually be safer with someone who lives in the community, who's your driver, and can help kind of suss out what the, the environment's like in real time. And that's ultimately the decision that we went with that felt the best course of action. So you really are relying on your driver and your fixer to be trustworthy and to have your back.
So can we talk a little bit about kind of where it all goes from this point, right? Because I mean, you mentioned the election off the top, and I mean, we know the outcome of the election. What does that mean for the future of the Amazon?
Well, anyone that cared about the Amazon wanted this result.
Yeah.
Bolsonaro out, Lula in.
Lula in.
I mean, I also wanted Bolsonaro in because, or not Bolsonaro, Lula in because he's a leftist. Bolsonaro was just shit. Just overall. Like, you know, the more leftist leaders we have, the better.
The future to have the Amazon, indigenous people, and a more colorful community or not.
She says Bolsonaro has neutered environmental protection and encouraged deforestation
She's right.
in the Amazon up an alarming 70% in his term.
We have some scenarios that show that the Amazon would not survive to another 4 years. So we are going to pass the tipping point of the Amazon.
Time will tell whether Lula can take on this huge sort of responsibility under tight timelines.
Does time tell us anything? Because he's been president before.
He has, and actually deforestation did decrease significantly under his presidency. So there is some evidence
She's right.
to
It did.
suggest that he will have success in this if you look at his track record.
Ninguém está salvo. A emergência climática afeta a todos, embora seus efeitos recaiam com maior intensidade sobre os mais vulneráveis. A desigualdade entre ricos e pobres manifesta-se até mesmo nos esforços para a redução das mudanças climáticas. Por esse motivo, quero aproveitar esta conferência para anunciar que o combate à mudança climática terá o mais alto perfil na estrutura do meu próximo governo.
Is the promise right now from Lula to protect the Amazon, is it ambitious in any way? Is there anything that he said that would lead us to believe, oh no, this is someone who does actually want to protect this and to preserve it?
So that's one thing that Lula has spoken about was just rehabilitating the environmental departments that Bolsonaro sort of gutted that enforce the laws that are already in place. The laws are in place and they have been in place through this whole period, but the problem was the enforcement of them. And so it's not that necessarily he needs to change the laws, but he needs to start honoring them again.
Now, this is exactly right, but I should underline that it's hard to overstate how much damage there may be to undo here. So early in his presidency, Bolsonaro actually accused a Brazilian science agency of lying about rising deforestation.
What?
And critics say that his tenure has emboldened...
Is that a thing? Like, if it is, that's wild to be saying.
Emboldened land grabbers who operate with impunity. You know, one other thing. Jill told me that no fire in the Amazon rainforest is natural. There's no climate change to blame here. All
What?
those fires are man-made. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but are folks optimistic that there can be change, that these laws that already exist can be enforced?
I think they have no choice but to be optimistic because they had two options, and one, a lot of scientists and environmental advocates would say there was no chance for the Amazon had the result gone the other way, and it was a very close result.
It was like the margin was so thin.
Yeah.
Now, the exact result was 50.9% for Lula and 49.1% for Bolsonaro. There had been concern leading up to election night that Bolsonaro might not even cede power even if he lost the election. He had been making accusations of electoral fraud before the result had come in. But in the end,
Where have I heard that before?
The narrowest margin of victory ever in history for a Brazilian presidential election. It was the first time a sitting president failed to win a second term. And in the end, it looks like the transition is underway with Lula swearing in set for January 2023.
Yeah. But this will bring hope to them, and I'm sure there'll be further need for activism in order to still give the Amazon a voice in all this.
Because how close to a crisis point are we right now with the future of
Very close.
Because we've all seen elections. We've been through enough elections to know that there's a difference between the promise and actual action, right? So
very, very close.
In the next four or 5 years, then what?
It will affect all of us because the Amazon is at a point where they predict a lot of it won't be able to come back.
She's right.
Inside the forest, biologist Marcelo Foranato leads us through singed trees, supposed to be a conservation area.
So this was all fire 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
A healthy, mature forest was here 3 years ago, but same pattern, loggers, then fires, pasture is seeded already.
How many of these fires are deliberately set?
99% são criminosos.
99% are by criminals. Nobody is licensed to carry out a fire, and they are prohibited by law.
It's turning to savanna, and once a certain amount of the forest turns to savanna, the entire biome isn't able to exist essentially in the way that it does. It won't be able to will impact rain patterns in different ways. It will impact ocean currents in different ways, and ultimately, the thing that I guess is an easy thing to keep in mind is how much carbon the forest holds. As you clear it and burn it, you're releasing that carbon back into the atmosphere. So not only are the trees not there to take in the carbon dioxide, but they're also re-releasing
everything
more.
That over the hundreds and thousands of years that the forest has been, it's all
going right back out. So that is, I guess, the big concern here is that, we need that forest globally to influence our climate, and if we start getting rid of it, then that will have catastrophic effects.
So Jill, can I end with a question that maybe I should have started with, but that I think works as a final question? What is it that you and Susan set out to do in doing this story, and do you think you accomplished it?
I mean, I think we set out to show the connection between what's happening in people's lives, the choices that they have, the choices they don't have, and climate change. And so with the election, we all need to be watching things like this to see what the Brazilians are deciding, because it does have a very direct impact on Canadians. And I think that's what we want to shed some light on, and also show some of the tension.
And I honestly hope that the Liberal government will actually work together with President Lula instead of trying to villainize him because he's leftist. But there is a very good chance that we will end up villainizing him for sure.
And why they exist. I think all in all, for us, it was a success, and I guess it's just hopefully people took something from it as well, learned something from it.
Well, Jill, I'm glad you're home safe and sound.
Me too. Thank
Thanks
you.
for sharing.
Thank you.
Now, since we did that interview several weeks ago, Lula was officially sworn in as president, his election win certified by Brazil's electoral court. He also attended this year's COP27 climate conference in Egypt. And, he reaffirmed that his priority would be to fight deforestation in the Amazon. Now, whether Lula will actually turn things around for the world's largest rainforest, we
easily could.
know, but the stakes couldn't be higher. Okay, we'll be right back after this short break with a sneak peek at what we've got coming up for the rest of the week. Hey there, welcome back to About That, and Happy New Year. I guess I should have said that at the start of the show. Now, to mark the start of 2023, we are going to be doing something a little bit different on the program for the rest of this week. Because, so much of the past few weeks have been about reflections, right, on the year that was. So we wanted instead to look forward to what's to come. Now, we're not in the business of predicting the future, but there is a lot that 2022 can tell us about 2023. So we've pulled together some of our friends to delve into what this new year might hold. And here's a sneak peek. I have Donovan Bennett joining me right now. So we've got a lot of clips and a lot of material to get through.
To scapegoat hockey as a centerpiece for toxic culture.
What?
With the grain, and down he goes. The greatest of all time. Some miscommunication, it's in! Canada on this most memorable of days have put 4 past Jamaica. Canada is going to the World Cup!
We're going to have 8 teams to start, 4 in the East, 4 in the West.
There needs to be a future, and we see far too many young girls dropping out of sports, and hopefully this can help change that.
Gosh, this took a long time to get to this point. I mean, it's been a long time coming.
Too long. Women led league, looking for women investors, women owners, but backed by the corporate.
Yeah, I think that's all, right? It doesn't seem like there's going to be anything else. Okay, so let's get on to the Pope in the Pope in Italy dying. To be frank, I honestly don't care, but it's still something I think you should cover.
A 95-year journey nearing its end, in solemnity and tradition. Just as Pope Benedict, a stickler for Catholic doctrine, would have liked it. Inside St. Peter's Basilica, Italian leaders among the first to visit the retired Pope in repose.
Bro!
Outside,
Bro!
retired Pope in repose.
Not gonna lie, he looks like a he looks like a vampire that hasn't had like any substance in like 300 years. Like, come on, bro. He looks so like it doesn't even look real, to be perfectly honest.
Pose. Outside, lines formed around the perimeter of the plaza to say a final goodbye.
When seeing that, we got goosebumps.
You kind of feel quite more and more emotional as you get closer to viewing, the Pope's body and realize the impact that he's had.
To give me a kind of comfort to say he's laying in peace.
Of the hundreds who've streamed through here,
Many are simply tourists, not necessarily people coming to pay respects to a pope who's essentially been retired and out of the public eye for nearly 10 years.
In many ways, this pope, a stranger to a younger generation.
I was pretty small and young when he was pope.
And for some tourists,
the lineup's just too big.
Not worth the wait. Nearly 4 million flocked to the Vatican for the last papal funeral. Far fewer are expected on Thursday. Benedict's legacy has doubtless been overshadowed by the charismatic Pope Francis, but not among devout traditionalists.
I think the generation to come will understand how big he was, how large his theology and his knowledge and his wisdom, all this, yes. I think this generation don't see really what he was.
For me, he will be remembered as someone who, as the true guardian of tradition.
And while the crowds may be a little smaller, they will be no less devoted to the former Pope and his beloved tradition. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Vatican City.
Si stupirono delle cose dette loro dai pastori. Maria da parte sua custodiva tutte queste cose, meditandole nel suo cuore. I pastori se ne tornarono, glorificando e lodando Dio, come era stato detto loro.
E oggi affidiamo alla Madre Santissima l'amato Papa Emerito Benedetto XVI perché lo accompagni nel suo passaggio.
I mean, like, just going off of everything, do people honestly care that he's dead? Like, he lived till, like, fucking 92, man. Like, he had a good life. Like, not gonna lie.
Questo mondo a Dio. Preghiamo la Madre in modo speciale per i figli che soffrono e non hanno più la forza di pregare, per tanti fratelli e sorelle colpiti dalla guerra in tante parti del mondo, che vivono questi giorni di festa al buio e al freddo, nella miseria e nella paura, immersi nella violenza e nell'indifferenza. E la benedizione di Dio Onnipotente, Padre e Figlio e Spirito Santo, discenda su di voi e con voi rimanga sempre.
Amen.
This is like cult shit. Right?
The Vatican has announced that former Pope Benedict has died at the age of 95.
Oh, sorry. He's older than I thought he was. He's 95, bro.
Bells ringing out across St. Peter's Square to mark the death of the former pontiff. Born Joseph Ratzinger in a small German village, he was a conservative intellectual who believed strongly in Catholic traditions and rose through the ranks to lead the world's largest church.
Bro, of course he was a conservative. Of course, bro.
Earlier this week, we heard the Pope Emeritus was very sick. Megan Williams now with more on how he's being remembered.
The announcement came this morning from the Vatican that former Pope Benedict XVI died at 9:34 inside the convent that he's been living in for the past 10 years inside the Vatican, just steps from where the present Pope Francis lives. Now, shortly after they made the announcement of his death, they announced that the funeral will be on Thursday, 9:30 Rome time, and will be presided over by Pope Francis himself. Pope Benedict's body will lie in state inside St. Peter's just behind me starting Monday morning. This is an unprecedented situation to have a former pope die while a current pope is still alive, and both of them still living within the Vatican. As many people know, Pope Benedict was the first pope to resign in 6 centuries. It shocked the world. He said at the time when he was 85, almost 10 years ago, that he no longer had the mental and physical strength to continue as leader of the Catholic Church. He was a...
But he still went on, bro. He still went on.
A very conservative leader, and at the time that he resigned, the church was reeling with sexual abuse scandals that he himself...
Bro, when do they not deal with like sexual abuse scandals though? That's the thing.
...was involved in later on. Just last year, a German inquiry into sexual abuse and cover-up in that country said that Benedict, when he was Archbishop of Munich in the late 70s and early 80s, covered up knowing about an abusing priest, which Benedict himself...
Come on, bro. Come on. Don't give me even more reasons to not like him. Like, come on, bro.
...later admitted that he had not given all the information that...
I love it when conservatives say that, you know, like leftists or even liberals for that matter are like fucking pedophiles, and yet conservatives are the ones who are like doing the pedophile shit and like trying to cover it up. Like, come on, bro.
He was aware of. Benedict was also very divisive when it came to LGBTQ members of the Catholic Church. Before becoming Pope, he was head of the Doctrine of the Faith, which was sort of the doctrinal enforcer of the Catholic Church, and issued some very condemning statements about LGBTQ people.
Of course.
Right now, the
Of course he
church
did.
remains divided in a sense between supporters, arch-traditionalists, conservatives of Benedict, and the fact that he was an enforcer of traditions and of Catholic doctrine, Catholic rules. Pope Francis, of course, is a very different pope. He is a pope that is far less interested in those sorts of issues, much more interested in reaching out to the poor, the marginalized, migrants. That really has been the focus of Francis's papacy. Nonetheless, the two remained close. Pope Francis visited him quite a bit. They lived just steps away from each other inside Vatican City. And of course, Pope Francis will be presiding over the funeral of former Pope Benedict on Thursday morning. Megan Williams, CBC News.
Like, I mean, it's just giving me... They're just giving me more ammo to hate this creep, man. Like, Jesus.
A gathering of the faithful on Sunday morning. Adoration for a pope very much alive, paying tribute to the now deceased Pope Emeritus.
Benedetto XVI.
In the crowd, former Pope Benedict is not far from people's minds, even if those minds are at odds over his legacy.
He wasn't maybe the best one to, take the church to our time, I would suppose.
Whoever thinks he was not a man of God.
Remember when, like, people were, like, protesting Pope Francis for, like, apparently being, like, an ally to LGBTQ people? Like, remember when fucking conservatives lost it? Like, come on, bro.
Their own problem, because he was a real man of God.
What?
Long before he became the polarizing Pope Benedict, Joseph Ratzinger's childhood was forged in Nazi Germany, in a family vehemently opposed to the regime, conscripted to the Wehrmacht.
I mean, like, to be fair, though, it's not really hard to oppose Nazi Germany, because, like, Germany in that time was fucking awful.
Briefly imprisoned at a POW camp at the tail end of the war, before entering the priesthood with his brother. Once a force for reformation of the church, Ratzinger grew wary of rapid change, becoming the leading voice of conservative doctrine, known to some as God's Rottweiler. His brief time as pope rocked by sexual abuse scandals. He would be the first pontiff to meet with victims. Even so,
maybe it's a good thing he's gone.
Abuse would dog him into retirement. New allegations in January that he knew and did nothing about abuse when he served as Archbishop of Munich. As
like, are we really surprised?
Funeral, and the Vatican prepares for thousands to file past Benedict's body over the next 3 days.
Like, he completely looks like fucking Dracula, except in, like, funny clothing, right? I'm going to come back and suck the blood of the virgins. Whoa.
Teacher Sean Army, on holiday in Florence, rushed to be among the first to queue to offer prayers.
I think the church is nothing if not tradition.
Many may have criticized Benedict for his staunch conservatism. Army is not among them.
The draw for me as a
I wonder what his stances are then.
Catholic, and you know, I fell away from the church for a long time.
I wonder if he's libertarian as well.
But one thing I found solace and comfort in is that its teachings don't change.
What?
Complicated legacy for sure. Katie, what do we know about Benedict's funeral?
It will be small, in line with Pope Benedict's wishes. He has the misfortune of being sandwiched between two very charismatic popes. Pope John Paul II's funeral, one of the most attended events in Christian history. This one, of course, will be smaller, but nonetheless historic, with one pope presiding over the funeral of another.
Katie,
I mean, who gives a shit,
Vatican
right?
City. Thanks very much.
Like, who honestly cares, right? It seems like so inconsequential. Benedict what is that, fucking 6th, who led the Roman Catholic Church through a period of transformation, controversy, and scandal before becoming the first pontiff in 600 years to resign, has died. Who cares? He was 95. He had a good life. Let's just say that. Benedict had been expected to make his papacy largely about reassuring traditional conservative Roman Catholic doctrine, but ended up spending much of it dealing with the fallout of the church's sexual abuse scandal. At 78, Benedict was elected as pontiff in April of 2005, so his term had always been expected to be short relative to his predecessors. He was the oldest cardinal to become pope since Clement the 12th in 1730, and was seen by many as a transitional leader. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, a Catholic scholar known more for his righteous theological teaching than his charisma. He was an unexpected choice. Some considered him too polarizing and radical compared to his populist predecessor, John Paul II. Benedict made history when on February 28th, 2003, he became the first pope in almost 600 years to resign. Pope Gregory XII in 1415 was the last to quit while in office. Benedict cited his age. He was 85 and deteriorating health as reasons for his resignation. Yeah, I'm sure that was his reason. Totally not like the sexual abuse scandals that were going on, right? Like, what is with like the last two streams and like talking about like abuse and like sexual abuse? Like, oh my god, I hate it so much, man. In late 2022, those who had seen Benedict said his body was very frail, but his mind was still sharp. Yeah, I don't believe that at all. However, Italian news reports said he had been suffering from respiratory problems over the Christmas period. His decision to resign after holding the papacy for less than 8 years caught Catholics around the world and even some of his closet adversaries off guard. Many expected his papacy to be characterized by a strict conservative interpretation of Roman Catholic doctrine. Well, he definitely used his time as people to impose his vision of the pure Catholic and the pure Catholic Church and denounce the dictatorship of relativism. He saw permeating modern secular society and infiltrating parts of the church. He held what would be considered liberal positions on many social issues. He opposed the death penalty and the war in Iraq, advocated for the poor and disenfranchised, included excessive wealth and environmental pollution among the 7 modern sins he introduced in 2008, and denounced the blind pursuit of economic profit for its own good. In the end, however, these aspects of his papacy were largely overshadowed by the winding scope of the sexual abuse scandal involving Catholic prelagy. One of Benedict's first acts of pope was to remove Marcel Macil the Golado, a known pedophile and pornographer, from active ministry. The disgraced leader of the Legion of Christ, a secretive Catholic order, the Golado, found in Mexico, had sexually abused young Samaritans over several decades and fathered children by different women. But before Benedict, the Golado had never been sanctioned by the church. Allegations that the church had turned a blind eye to sexual abuse by Clingy cut even closer in 2010 when details surfaced from a priest from Usan accused of sexually abusing minors was transferred to Ratzinger's Archdiocese for therapy in 1980 when Ratzinger was Archbishop of Munich. Peter Hollerman was given a pastoral assignment as the archdiocese and continued to modest minors for years, even after he was convicted of such offenses in 1986. Although Ratzinger's HR general at the Munich diocese, Gerhard Gruber took full responsibility for Hollerman's transfer there and claimed Ratzinger was not aware of all the personal matters within the archdiocese. Many found it hard to believe he could have remained ignorant of the case. The Hollerman case was just one of hundreds of sexual abuse allegations that surfaced during Benedict's papacy, including at least 300 in Germany alone. That's way too high. What the fuck? The Pope could not shake the scandal even after he wrote an unprecedented formal letter of apology to victims of abuse in Ireland, where the Catholic Church had been rocked by revelations that bishops, often in collusion with the state and police, covered up the abuse and made children sign confidentiality agreements protecting their abusers. That's fucking disgusting, man. Benedict appointed a group of prelates to investigate Irish Deceits and Samaritans in May 2010. He was also the first pope to hold an official summit on the topic of sexual abuse in the church, assembling bishops from 100 countries as the leaders of 33 religious orders for a 4-day conference at the Vatican in February 2012. I mean, you know, when this is like something that he did, that seems like kind of a problem. Like, he was the first pope to hold a summit on sexual abuse within the church. Like, come on, bro. Come on, bro. Then in January 2022, an independent report commissioned by the German church found he failed to act in 4 cases of sexual abuse when he was Archbishop of Munich between 1977 and 1982. Benedict later asked for forgiveness for his handling of the cases, but admitted no wrongdoing. Of course he would. Benedict's tenure was also marred by a handful of personal gaffes and controversies, which he sometimes took pains to correct. In 2006, for example, he arranged Muslims around the world when he chose to quote a 14th century Byzantine emperor's disparage remarks about Islam during a theological lecture at the University of Regensburg in Bavaria. He tried to erase the rift 3 months later by visiting Istanbul's Blue Mosque, becoming only the second pope in history to enter a Muslim house of worship. 2009, he drew commendations for reversing the excommunications of Shemic bishops from from the ultra-conservative Society of Saint PAX, some of whom had denied certain aspects of the Holocaust. Come on, bro. He also raised eyebrows when he created a special division of the Catholic Church for evangelical bishops, deflecting from the Church of England over issues such as ordaining of women bishops. Although generally unwavering on issues such as homosexuality in order the ordaining of women priests and contraptions, Benedict surprised many in November 2010 when he told a journalist that there may be some cases in which using a it was contraception. I just can't read. In which condoms are justified. In speaking out, for example, against the war in Iraq or excessive consumption, he saw the alignment of social science with one's individual morality and integral to the Catholic teachings, and also as the only way to alleviate human suffering, to bring the world to its moral repute. It is the responsibility of the Church to educate co-sciences, to teach moral responsibility, and to unmask the evil, to unmask this ideology of money which enslaves man, he told the media, traveling with him on a March 2012 papal visit to Mexico, where he spoke out strongly against the country's deadly drug war. He advocated against the Lingeries directing engagement in politics, whether in Latin America or elsewhere. The Church's mission is not political in nature, he said on a visit to West Africa, to a West African nature to Benin. Christ does not propose a revolution of a social or political kind. I mean, sometimes you need to, though. Instead, Benedict focused on the idea of charity rather than the more political notion of social justice as the heart of the Church's social doctrine. He urged Christians engaged in the charitable works to not be inspired by ideologies aimed at improving the world, but rather by their living relationship with Christ and the love for others it inspires. An accomplished pianist who spoke several languages, Ratzinger was born on April 16th, 1927 in Marketal am Inn, a small town in Moravia, said the strongly Catholic religion in South Germany. His father, a policeman, was also named Joseph, who came from an old Moravian farming family of modest means. He took an anti-Nazi stance after Adolf Hitler's come to power, and the family moved several times before settling in a village outside of Trusenstein in 1937. Ratzinger entered the seminary at the Trumanston in 1937. And in 1943 was drafted along with the rest of his class into the anti-aircraft unit of the military. In his early teens, he was a member of the Hitler Youth, which was compulsory for all German children at the time, although according to National Catholic report, senior correspondent John L. Allen Jr., who had written 2 books about Benedict, he was an unenthusiastic member and regularly skipped meetings. Ratzinger insisted he never fired a shot while in the military, and in 1945, he deserted and returned to Trudenstein, where he was briefly held in an American prisoner of war camp. After the war, he re-entered the seminary and was ordained to into the priesthood in 1951, soon after he recovered his doctorate in theology and from the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich. By the end of the decade, he was lecturing as a full professor of theology at the University of Bonn. He later moved to the University of Münster, and by the late 1960s, was chair of the dogmatic theology at the University of Tübingen. But he was irritated by the growing liberalism of the 60s, radicalism of the Thüringen's student body, and moved to a more conservative University of Risenberg, where he eventually became dean and spent part of his time advising German bishops on the matter of theology. In 1977, Pope Paul VI appointed him Archbishop of Munich, one of the largest dioceses in the world, and 3 months later made him a cardinal. Ratzinger would go on to be elected dean of the college by cardinals 25 years later. Ratzinger continued along a conservative path, becoming perfect for the Vatican's powerful Congregation for Doctrine of Faith in 1981, and moving to Rome to serve as Pope John Paul II's defender of his clear faith, a position he held until 2005 conclaves. His zeal in enforcing orthodoxy earned Ratzinger quite a few labels over the years. It's so hot in here. He was called variously the Hammer, Cardinal No, and God's Rottweiler. But some have also said he had a warm pastoral side that did not always come across the media's coverage. What he lacked in the theatrical flourish that made John Paul so popular made him up for in his devotion to praeology and for his eccentric on matters of theology. When describing the approval of the seemingly stiff and stern Benedict, Allen famously told Time magazine that while people may have come to see John Paul, they came to hear Benedict. With his passing, the voice of Benedict the Pope may be gone, but that of Benedict the theologian will undoubtedly live on through many scholarly works he authored throughout his career and papacy. Okay, let's move on to some other stuff. So, remember last week we had talked about the stabbings that happened in Idaho? We have some updates on that. So, primarily, yeah, it's like the Idaho killing, like, you know, there's like a bunch of different stuff here. Relatives of a man arrested in Pennsylvania in the slayings of 4 University of Idaho students expressed sympathy for the victims' families, but also vowed to support him and promote his presumptions presumptions of innocence. Brian Kotenberg, 28, is eager to be exacerbated and plans to tell a judge Tuesday in Pennsylvania that he will not fight extradition to Idaho, said his public defender, Jason Labar. Moscow, Idaho Police Captain Anthony Dallinger said that would speed up the process of bringing Kohenberger to Idaho to face charges, but he wasn't sure yet when that might happen. Kohenberger is a doctoral student and teaching assistant of the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology at Washington State University. Was taken into custody earlier Friday by state police at his parents' home in Chestnut Hill Township in eastern Pennsylvania, authorities said. His parents, Michael and Marianne, and his 2 older sisters, Amanda and Melissa, said in a statement released Sunday by his attorney that they care deeply for families who have lost their precious children. Their are no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel, and we pray for them each day. For them. The family said that relatives will continue to let the legal process unfold, and that as a family we will love and support our son and brother. They said they have fully cooperated with law enforcement to try to seek truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make enormous assumptions. Labar, the public defender in Monroe County, Idaho, urged people not to pass judgment until a fair trial has been held. Mr. Cohenberger has been accused of very serious crimes, but the American justice system cloaks him in a veil of innocence, Labar said in a statement. He should be presumed innocent until proven otherwise, not tried in the court of public opinion. Captain Dellinger told the Associated Press on Saturday that authorities believe Cohenberger was responsible for all 4 of the murders. We believe we've got our man, he said. I mean, like, there's no shot that he did it, right? Because, like, they found, like, his fingerprints and stuff there, right? Bill Thompson, a prosecutor in Latah County, Idaho, said during a news conference Friday that investigators believe Cohenberger broke into the University of Idaho students' home near campus with the intent to commit murder. The bodies of the victims were found November 13th, several hours after the investigation. They died. The students, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, of Rathdrum, Idaho, Madison Morgan, 21, the Koger, Diallo, Idaho, Zana Horndild, 20, the Post Falls, Idaho, and Ethan Chapin, 20, the Conway, Washington, were members of the university's Greek system and close friends to Morgan, Goncalves, and Horndo lived in a 3-story rental home with 2 other roommates. Horndale and Chapin were dating, and he was visiting the house that night. Autopsies showed all 4 were likely asleep when they were attacked. Some had defensive wounds from each of the stabbing, each was stabbed multiple times. There were no signs of sexual assault, police said. Christina Tivis, a spokesperson for the Chapin family, declined to comment Monday on the Cohenberger family statement. Shannon Gray, a lawyer for the Goncalves family, did not immediately respond to an email seeking a comment. Latah County prosecutors have said the for the 4 charges of first-degree murder in Idaho will remain sealed until he is returned. Uh, he is also charged with felony burglary in Idaho. Many details of the case are expected to be released after Cohenberger's first appearance in an Idaho courtroom. Dollinger said, like, is it just gonna, yeah, it looks like it's just gonna go that, like, it's just gonna go over the same thing, right? Yeah, it's like it.
Well, ordinary Canadian.
So, the top, what is it? I think like 10 CEOs in Canada have already made $14.3 million, and it's not even, and it's only been like 3 days.
Canadians are tightening their belts thanks to sky-high inflation. Canada's corporate brass are raking in more than ever. In fact, about 1 hour from now, Canada's top CEOs will have made more than the average worker makes all year. Scott Peterson is following the story for us this morning. So, Scott, what time? What time is this exactly?
It's exactly 9:43. So just to break that down, Hillary, that means that the average executive comes in and 43 minutes later, they have made exactly what the average Canadian worker takes 52 weeks to.
So this is just like another reason why we should get rid of capitalism, right? Because like they made all this money, $14.3 million a year, and they made the average Canadian worker's salary within 3 days.
And so this is a survey by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. It comes out every first working day of the year, and this morning it is earlier than ever, and that means that CEOs are being compensated more than ever. Let's take a look at the report out this morning. It's called Breakfast of Champions, and the top CEOs, for example, and the way they make this equation is they make $14.3 million in 2021. That's the top 100 CEOs in the country, and that's the highest of all time. The average Canadian salary is $58,800. So if you're making that amount of money a year by 9:43 this morning, that means you've made $58,800, the average Canadian salary.
Which is ridiculous, by the way. Like, there's no reason that should be so high.
That takes 52 weeks to make. Now, the Canadian top CEOs now make 243 times more than the average worker. That's a record high, and the salary has been up 70% since the financial crisis in 2008. And the CCPA points out that executive compensation generally come in the form of bonuses, and that's taxed at a lower rate than the rest of us pay as well. So a little bit of insult to injury, but news to chew on for a lot of Canadians just coming in for their first cup of coffee, that seeing these big CEOs making that much money and that much more money for the rest of the year.
Like, there's no reason that should be a thing, right? Like, no shot. So yeah. An arrest was made over Twitter threats to kill MPs. A 19-year-old Ottawa man has been arrested for posting numerous threats on Twitter, the RCMP said. According to a press release Tuesday, the arrest comes after the RCMP's Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, INSET, was told on November 8th about death and terrorism-related threats that a Twitter user was posting. I mean, it's like your most fucking sane Twitter user, though. The threat targeted Parliament Hill, the Department of Defense, the Embassy of the Police's Republic of China, as well as the Embassy of the United States of America in Ottawa, the release said. The RCMP press release identified the accused as Daniel Hound, adding that he was taken into custody and later released on conditions. Court documents, which were obtained by Global News, detailed the threats Hound is charged with making on Twitter. Excuse me. The documents allege that the Ottawa man threatened to cause death or bodily harm to members of Parliament, as well as the U.S. and Chinese embassy staff. In addition to that, he allegedly threatened to use homemade dirty bombs to destroy the Department of National Defense building in Ottawa and the U.S. Embassy building. Hound or Horde Code is also charged in relation to threats to use explosives to destroy Parliament. Finally, the documents allege the man threatened to burn and destroy the Chinese embassy using jet fuel and a single match. Finally, the documents alleged all the threats are taken seriously. This includes tweets on social media, according to Staff Sergeant Pascal Hubert of INSET. This file demonstrates how communication between departments plays a key role in keeping our community safe, Hubert added in the release. The Ottawa man has been charged with 4 counts of a terrorist hoax, 4 counts of knowingly uttering a threat to cause death or bodily harm to a person, and knowingly uttering a threat to burn, destroy, and damage real property. Terrorism charges in Canada are rare, according to Stephen Carvin, a former Canadian Security Intelligence Service analyst who now teaches at Carleton University. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, she said. Overall, Carvin said it is positive to see police take online threats activity more seriously. Which, yeah, it is. Because all these fucking hogs say this psychotic shit online and they don't get prosecuted for it, which is wild to me. Like, I don't... Like, yeah, it's crazy, because, like, it's how they, you know, start violence to begin with. However, she noted that recent changes at Twitter with its Blue subscription feature, which allows anyone to pay $8 US a month to have their content featured, and promptly could breed more misinformation online. I mean, yeah, it's just how it is. So if anything, that Twitter has moved backwards rather than forwards in terms of actually hosting misinformation and disinformation, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works in terms of criminal content. Code is scheduled to appear in court on January 18th. So yeah, remember last week how we talked about the Freedom Convoy 2.0 coming to Winnipeg? Apparently it's canceled, which is kind of sad, because I really wanted to see Winnipeggers and convoyers go at it. It was like, it would have been just fucking funny to see convoyers get ruled by Winnipeggers and freeze their ass off in Winnipeg, which really sucks. Organizers and supporters of the Freedom Convoy 2.0 are divided over whether another event inspired by last year's disruptive protest in the capital will take place in Ottawa and Winnipeg next month. Several key figures from last February's protest, which occupied the capital's downtown streets, for nearly a month, insists people will gather in Manitoba mid-February, despite a press release from a main organizer claiming otherwise. True. James Beutter, co-founder of the anti-government group Canada Unity and a co-organizer of last February's protest in Ottawa, said in a Facebook post he was canceling Freedom Convoy 2.0 for unspecified security reasons. I have had several security breaches and personal character attacks made against me and others on the Canada Unity, the team Canada Unity. Beutter said in a post. As a result of these security breaches that are beyond our control, I cannot in good conscience guarantee public safety as I promised. In a text to CBC, Beutter wrote, "There will be no convoy anywhere in Canada, be it Ottawa or Winnipeg, with my name, with the Canada Unity Freedom Convoy brand." Doesn't matter, because if there still is one, you know his ass is going to be going. Beutter has originally called for protesters to return to Ottawa for a 3-day demonstration starting February 17th. He later said that Ottawa would be a stop on the way to protest in Winnipeg. Other supporters, meanwhile, contradicted Beutter's assertions. Another organizer who announced the Convoy 2.0 plan for Winnipeg alongside Beutter claimed the event will move ahead. I mean, either way, like, these guys are fucking clowns, right? Because either way, they're going to get clapped by the cold weather in Winnipeg and Winnipeggers not putting up with their shit, or they just look like a bunch of pussies, right? Like, it's one or the other. Multiple people and groups are involved. It would unite. The World Unity Convoy 2023 is not cancelled, Ron Clark wrote in an email to the CBC. Likewise, Tyson Billings, also known as Freedom Greg, said he still plans to attend a convoy gathering in Winnipeg next month. What a bunch of fucking losers, right? I just can't wait to see them, like, get hypothermia, and then we can all laugh at these losers. I don't know if there's something still going on going to Ottawa or not, he said, but the main convoy, the World Unity Convoy, is about unity and it's about bringing people together. Yeah, totally. It's totally not like, Winnipeggers are gonna kick your ass. Because you don't fuck with Winnipeggers, let's just say that much. The mixed messaging comes from the Freedom Convoy movement, which began as protest against COVID-19 vaccination passports, masks, and other health mandates, appears to be losing steam. Infighting between the members has led to a fracturing of the movement, resulting in disagreements over details ranging from the name of the event to its main goals. Beutter is among the dozens of protesters and supporters facing charges for their involvement in the original convoy protest. Bail conditions prevent him and many other familiar names from returning to Ottawa, which is not surprising and really funny. Thousands of people in trucks and cars occupied the Capitol in early 2022 to protest health mandates and other government policies. it came to an end after the Trudeau government invoked the Emergencies Act. The federal government suspended mandatory vaccination for all federal employees, domestic travelers, and transportation workers in June 2022. In a statement to CBC News, the Winnipeg Police Service said it's aware of the online dialogue from a group regarding an event in February in Winnipeg. We are assuming information. We are assessing information, but do not have any further comment to make at this time, a Winnipeg police spokesperson said in an email. So the thing is we already know the fucking police won't stop it again. We saw what happened last protest. The police did fuck all and actually shared information with the protesters. Like, you know, these clowns are gonna get clapped by fucking Winnipeggers, and it's gonna be incredibly funny to watch. I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait for them to freeze their asses off because they're gonna be underprepared for the February weather in Winnipeg, and then they're gonna get their asses kicked by a bunch of fucking Winnipeggers. Like, bro, we've seen how fucking Winnipeggers act when, you know, they lose a Jets game. It's gonna be fucking awesome. So Sam Bankman-Fraud pleads not guilty to his fraud case, which, of course he did, bro. Sam Bankman-Fraud pleaded not guilty on Tuesday to criminal charges that he cheated investigators in his now bankrupt FTX cryptocurrency exchange. Bankman-Fraud is accused of looting billions of dollars in FTX customer deposits to support his Amelida research hedge fund by real estate and make millions of dollars in political contributions to in what prosecutors have called a fraud of epic proportions. Like, that's the funny thing, is like, you know, whenever there's like actual fucking fraud and shit going on, like whenever people who have like a fuck ton of money get caught with it red-handed, they get like they get off scot-free with at most like a slap on the wrist. The 30-year-old defendant entered the plea through his lawyer to 8 criminal counts, including wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering, before U.S. District Judge Louis Kaplan in Manhattan Federal Court. It is common for criminal defendants to initially plead not guilty. They may change their pleas later. Bankman-Fraud could face up to 115 years in prison if convicted. Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it, bro. Federal prosecutor Danielle Sawson told the judge that prosecutors and defense lawyers have discussed a possible September or October trial date. She said a trial could last 4 weeks. Bankman-Fraud, a Massachusetts Institution of Technology graduate, rode a boom in the valve of Bitcoin and other digital assets to build a net worth of an estimated 26 billion American dollars, and became an influential political donor in the United States. But FTX collapsed in early November after a wave of withdrawals and declared bankruptcy on November 11th, wiping out Bankman-Fraud's fortune. He later said he had $100,000 in his bank account. Bankman-Fraud was extradited to the U.S. last month from the Bahamas, where he lived and where he was and where the exchange was based. Since his release on a $250 million bond on December 22nd, Bankman-Fraud had been subject to electronic monitoring and required to live with his parents, Joseph Bankman and Barbara Freed, both professors at Stanford Law School in California. The plan granted Bankman-Fraud's request not to publicize the names of the additional co-signers for the bond. Lawyers for Bankman-Frauds have said his parents, who co-signed the bond, have been receiving physical threats since FTX's collapse, and that other co-signers might face similar harassment unless their names were kept secret. A judge who imposed the new bail condition saying Bankman-Fraud cannot access FTX or Almanda assets. Prosecutor's case was strengthened by last month's guilty pleas of two Bankman-Fraud's closest associates, Caroline Ellison, who was Almand's chief executive, and Ray Wong, FTX's former chief technology officer, pleaded guilty to 7 of 4 criminal charges, respectively, and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Bankman-Fraud, Ellison, and Wong were also sued by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commissions and the Commodity Futures Trading Commissions. Ellison and Wong settled those civil cases. FTX's new chief executive, John Ray, known for his work in the energy company Iran Corp bankruptcy, has said FTX was ran on grossly inexperienced and unsociable people. Yeah, okay. All right, let's see what Danielle Smith has to say in this. Like, watch this? No, we didn't. Feels like we watched this, right? So I guess let's watch this.
This is a Global News special presentation.
Surprise, April Fools! I'm just kidding. This is
Oh God.
real.
From her announcement seeking the leadership of the UCP in May to a final ballot victory to become Alberta's next premier.
I'm back!
It's been a milestone year for Danielle Smith. 8 years after a controversial floor crossing from the Wild Rose to the Conservatives ended her first run at politics, she's made an unlikely comeback, taking aim at the federal government.
We are going to make sure that we push back against their invasion.
Ushering in bold, sometimes controversial changes for the province.
That's being
Today marks
nice.
a new dawn for Alberta, for Canada, and for the federation that binds us together.
And setting the stage for what's sure to be a hard-fought election next year. This is a conversation with the Premier.
Uh-oh.
So, Premier, thanks so much for joining us.
My
We do
pleasure.
appreciate it. It has obviously been a very big year for you. You were recently sworn in just a couple months ago as Alberta's 19th Premier. How would you describe your year and how the first few months been on the job?
The first couple of months on the job have been just amazing from a team building point of view. I know that during the leadership race it got a little bit fractious, and so people were really concerned about unity, especially with the kind of couple of years that our party has had. But I must tell you, I'm just so impressed with the other leadership candidates and my caucus team and my ministerial team. Everybody has been really constructive in bringing forward ideas.
That's Cap.
We've been able to build that into identifying our priorities. And I think people are feeling really good about where we're at.
So obviously your first order of business as a legislator was bringing in the Sovereignty Act, which you did have to make amendments to very quickly over this interpretation that it was going to give you and your cabinet some pretty sweeping powers outside of the legislature floor. So how is it that you guys wrote a law that really the entire country was watching for and had to make those kind of significant changes so quickly?
You know what I was most concerned about is that people had initially misinterpreted what I was trying to do with it. So we made sure that—
Wait, what? No one misinterpreted what you were trying to do with it. Everyone saw right through your bullshit. It's mostly because, like, you don't have, like, enough brain cells to actually, like, you know, like, actually write something, like, comparable down to try and get away with it. But it doesn't matter because, like, you're literally being fucking sued by indigenous leaders for trampling over treaty rights, so there's that as well.
That we called it the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. Because initially all of the coverage was that somehow this had something to do with leaving Canada. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that was not the case. It was about underscoring our constitutional rights as well as making sure that people understood that we were going to
Yeah, we want to take away your constitutional rights.
Charter rights of our citizens. And so the whole process was meant to start with the legislature because I respect the authority of MLAs to make decisions and give direction.
No,
and
you
that
don't.
Was, I think, part of the reason why the act needed to be amended a bit is that I think we had felt that by having it begin in the legislature and have the legislature give direction to cabinet, that we would be able to put the agenda in place. But I think it became pretty clear that MLAs said that if there was going to be any statutory change, they'd want that to come back to go through the regular process. I thought that was a reasonable change, so we made it, and I think we've got a really good bill.
So how was that put in there in the first
It's not
place?
true.
It was put in because I think because the whole process started in the legislature, we envisioned that the motion would say all of the different changes that needed to be made. And because it began as a legislative process with the affirmation of the MLAs, I think we felt that we could probably draft the initial motion that would have been able to address those issues. The MLAs felt differently. They felt like they wanted to make sure if there was any legislative change that it came back, and so that was the change that we made.
So you recently suggested that the Sovereignty Act could be used, for example, to fight something like the federal government's ban on single-use plastics. And you'd said on your radio show we could maybe still have plastic.
I mean, like, the single-use plastics thing is kind of fucking silly anyways. Like we've talked about time and time again, it's not actually going to solve anything. Like, we're still going to have, like, a fuck ton of plastics, even still single-use plastics, like, being thrown into the environment, right? Like, it's only for, like, I don't know, fucking takeout shit, right? It's not for, like, you know, the plastics, the single-use plastics that you see in the grocery. You know, there's a fuck ton more as well. And that's not even getting into the amount of plastics that, you know, companies throw out or just dispose of by, like, throwing them into, like, the ocean or some shit.
Straws, for example, in this province, if the act had been in place and if it was used properly. Is that the kind of thing that this legislation was meant for?
We actually have taken a constitutional challenge against the federal government for usurping our area of jurisdiction. They identified plastics as toxic, and I think it's actually kind of absurd that the federal government would invade our jurisdiction and then their marquee legislation is doing something like banning.
But, like, plastics are toxic to people, though. Both the process of creating them and the process of, like, getting rid of them or getting rid of them, either by, like, you know, burning them or, like, just tossing them in the fucking ocean and making them become microplastics.
Straws and banning plastic utensils and banning stir sticks, when in fact they've created a huge amount of turmoil in our petrochemical industry, because now—
I mean, who gives a shit though, right? Like, it doesn't matter because, like, there are other nations that have done similar things, if not have gone further than what our fucking idiotic government is doing. right? Like substituting the plastic forks or the straws or stir sticks or whatever the fuck is not gonna actually solve the problems. Like it just wants, it's just making us feel like we're doing something despite the fact that we're not. Like sure, it has a tangible effect on the environment, but very, very slightly, right?
How they've interfered with the cross-border trade in one of our principal industries. So it may seem like a frivolous example, but I think we have to question why it is the federal government felt that it was so important to invade our jurisdiction.
What?
If that was the kind of outcome it was going to have. We have to make sure that we're defending our constitutional jurisdiction, and that includes the ability to defend our principal resource sectors. And that's part of the reason why we've launched a constitutional challenge on it. That happened prior to me becoming premier.
What?
Have you had a chance to discuss with your cabinet areas where they believe that the Sovereignty Act could not just theoretically, but practically be used in the coming months, and more specifically, even before the next election?
I think
Literally, if they I could see them using this if, or using the powers that they granted themselves if they lose the election. I could potentially see them doing that. I could potentially see them doing that for like federal laws that, you know, they don't want to do, like say increasing like the carbon tax on corporations. Like there's a multitude of different things that they could be doing that using it for 100%, but I honestly don't think they'll get away with it.
one of the areas that we see the biggest problem being is that the federal government is using environmental pretext to invade our jurisdiction. And we've seen it with declaring plastics toxic. We've seen it with the aggressive targets that they want to do around biodiversity goals and protected land.
Yeah, but like when the fuck have the liberals actually done that? Like they're just virtue signaling. They don't actually do anything about it. Like what?
And designations. We've seen it with aggressive emissions caps that they've proposed for fertilizer and for oil and natural gas. We've seen
that is very moderate in comparison to other countries that have a very, very more aggressive cap on emissions. Like it's very moderate in comparison.
With pronouncements from our environment minister that he doesn't want us using natural gas on our power grid anymore. And these are the kind of things that I
mean, yeah, we have fusion reactions like discovered that we could be investing into. We have nuclear fission. We have really good solar power. We have really good wind power. Like, you know, losing like one thing and making like a couple fucking morons cry about it is actually kind of funny to me.
I think that the federal government is attempting to do to create an environment where we have to reduce production. If you've got aggressive targets that are unachievable in too short a time frame, you can call it an emissions cap, but really it's a production cap. And that violates Section 92A of the Charter of Rights and of the Constitution.
No, it literally doesn't. So you're wrong on that. First of all, it does not infringe on any of that, as well as like it's literally not going to cap fucking production. It just won't.
Constitution. We have the right to develop our resources. We have the right to determine the pace. We've got the right to determine conservation policy. We also have the right to export it to other provinces to get it to market. And I think
she sounds so close of crying because the big scary liberals are doing very, very small, moderate reforms. It's really funny to me. She's gonna be like that fucking senator who broke down in Congress in America. Oh, I really hope that happens. It would be so funny if she did.
The federal government is continuously putting measures in place to try to override that right, and that's part of the reason why we're pushing back against him.
I want to ask about a comment you made in question period when you compared Alberta sovereignty, or the idea of Alberta sovereignty, to Indigenous sovereignty. You said that Alberta's treatment by Ottawa was just like First Nations treatment by the federal government under the Indian Act. In hindsight, do you think that's a fair comment, and do you stand by that?
I didn't want my comments to be misconstrued, so I apologize for it. But what I've observed is
Notice how she's stepping back what she said, despite the fact that she took a hard stance against it because she knows how unpopular that was.
With First Nations is they've asserted their sovereignty over the last 20 years. And those who have developed their own structures on reserve have been able to escape some of the paternalism of the Indian Act. I think what has happened in Canada is we've been a bit passive, is that we've allowed Ottawa to invade our jurisdiction, and now we're going to assert our autonomy so in a very similar way. So I respect.
No, they haven't. And they're literally suing your ass.
First Nations jurisdiction. I look at it as a nation-to-nation relationship. I'm going to continue to partner with them on areas that we should partner, but I think we've got a common problem. We've got a common problem with Ottawa treating us both in a paternalistic way and interfering in our areas of jurisdiction and interfering with our autonomy. So I'm going to make sure that I respect First Nations jurisdiction to keep on doing what they're doing, and we're just going to make sure that we get Ottawa to respect our autonomy as well.
And now that it's passed...
What? You have autonomy. Like, what? What the fuck is she even saying? Like, she's just rambling on and on. Like, come on.
The Sovereignty Act has faced, again, more criticism. First Nations groups, we've heard from municipal governments that have problems with it, academics. What makes you so sure that you're right about this and they're wrong?
There's lots of constitutional...
Because she's a conservative. She thinks that automatically whatever she does is the correct path forward. It's just how they operate. They give off like really big dumb guy energy.
Lawyers who have weighed in and said there's nothing unconstitutional about it. And
despite the fact that literally only one constitutional lawyer has said that, and like they're working under you and they don't want to fucking lose their job. And despite the fact that, you know, both political scientists and other constitutional lawyers have completely disagreed on that exact argument, you know, so there's that as well. And you don't even think that, you know, the federal government or Ottawa is a national government, which, you know, I don't know if I trust someone who says that, so there's that.
In fact, I was pleased to hear former Supreme Court Justice Jack Major say, what's so wrong with the province telling Ottawa, if you pass laws, make sure that they're in line with the Constitution? That's all this is. I had another constitutional lawyer write and say, there would be no need for this act if only Ottawa stayed within its areas of constitutional power. Look, provinces don't go out of their way to pass unconstitutional laws that violate federal jurisdiction. We respect the fact that our Constitution says that there's certain things that are federal powers. So why isn't that reciprocal? Why aren't they a lot more hesitant to pass laws that they know violate our jurisdiction? They do it all the time, whether it's on natural resource rights or whether it's on our areas of social services provision. They're constantly using the federal spending power to try to give us dollars with strings attached. And
I mean, they can do that though. That doesn't go against the that doesn't go against anything. They are allowed to do that. Like the federal government can give you money with strings attached, regardless of if you like it or don't like it. So one thing I wanted to pull up here before I fucking start clowning on her for that statement was John C. Major, or Jack Major, he was appointed by Stephen Harper to lead public inquiry fighting into the Air Indian flight A21 bombing and all that. So this is just a little bit about him. You know, there's not too terribly much to know about him. It doesn't really say what affiliation he was with. Yeah, that's just a little bit what he said, but I imagine that, he's I imagine he's fairly conservative if he did say that. Like, I don't really know too terribly much about our fucking Supreme Court. But
that is an appropriate use of the federal spending power.
actually it is. It 100% is an appropriate use of federal funding or spending power. If they actually want to give you money with strings attached, they have 100% right to do so. Like, it doesn't matter if you want to cry about it or not. They can do that. It's something that they're allowed to do. And if you don't like it, well, tough luck.
We believe that we need a partnership, that we should identify our priorities, and if they want to partner with us on funding, great. But they shouldn't be trying to dictate how we...
They literally are trying to partner with you on funding. You're just being a fucking moron. Like, they're like, yeah, we'll give you more money, but you actually have to spend it on healthcare, not have a surplus of unspent medical funding.
Deliver our programs. That's the approach that Quebec has always taken, and they, I think, have...
Yeah, and guess what? Quebec is having the exact same fucking problems.
Measure of respect from Ottawa that, quite frankly, Ottawa doesn't give us, and we're trying to assert that they should treat us differently.
Up next, Danielle Smith on the healthcare system and
Oh, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait to see what her approach on the healthcare system is. The failing healthcare system that is in Alberta.
affordability.
I think that we have to target it to those who really are the ones who are struggling the most in this inflation crisis.
As a conversation with the Premier continues.
I want to talk about affordability. As you know, Albertans are having a harder and harder time paying for the basics, and your government recently brought in a number of measures to try to address this. One-time payments for children, $600 for seniors, a pause in the gas tax and utility rebates. Some families say it's just not enough. It's not going to help us enough. Could there be more affordability measures coming from your government, and what would you say to those families?
We have to do a...
There 100% can be. 100%.
A very careful balance between making sure that we're providing support but not adding to the inflation crisis.
What?
So in the past, there have been
like, our inflation is being handled a lot better comparatively to other nations, even like other comparable OECD nations. Like, as much as I don't like the guy, Justin Trudeau has done a fairly good job when it comes to inflation. The only places that we're seeing inflation take place is at the pumps and at the grocery store, which he doesn't have any control over. That's the big oil. That's big oil and the grocery cartel. That's who's mostly responsible for that.
Some $500 payments. We felt if we did that would have actually fueled inflation and wouldn't have been targeted. So we wanted to make sure that we paced out the support over a period of time when we know people have higher bills. And in fact, because of the way that we're approaching it, by making sure that we're addressing some of the cost drivers, whether it's the energy costs and having some approaches around electricity prices and natural gas bills, but also gasoline and diesel taxes, we think that that's going to work against the inflationary pressures. I think the measures that we've done so far have actually reduced the inflationary aspect by 0.7%. And that's the reason why we did it the way we did. There's probably more that we can do. My affordability and utilities minister said that even for an individual or couple, they will get $900 of benefit from what we're proposing. There's going to obviously be more benefit to seniors and families with children and the most vulnerable, but
yeah,
I
totally.
think that we have to target it to those who really are the ones who are struggling the most in this inflation crisis.
Alberta is in the midst of a pretty serious health crisis. Hospitals, as you know, full of sick children. We have a shortage of family doctors. The new AHS administrator that you appointed said pretty early on that he thought with the new direction that your government was taking, we could see some positive, tangible changes within as little as 30 days. It's been about a month now. Have you seen any changes, and what would those be?
What I'm watching is what the pressure is on our emergency rooms. We have a website where we look at how long those waits are.
You know what would actually solve this problem? Is if instead of running the healthcare system like a business and having a surplus of over $12 billion, actually spending that money into the healthcare system and increasing the wage of the medical staff to keep them to stick around and give them new toys to play with, and invest into like more hospitals or pediatric children's hospitals. That would unironically solve that problem.
And just a week after Dr. John Cowell was appointed, we were seeing wait times of 10 and 12 and 17 hours. And we haven't seen anything like that, and we're a month in. And part of the reason for that is that we've worked really collaboratively with our frontline workers.
No, you haven't.
Sure that we're load leveling and moving patients around so that we don't put extra pressure on individual hospitals. We've got fast tracks so that if somebody comes in with a minor ailment, they can be treated and released more quickly. And we're also working with paramedics to ensure that we have a new system of being able to address routine transfers so that we don't have the long waiting lists that are, or the long waiting lines that happen at emergency rooms. The next major step that Dr. Cowell is going to take is looking at how we can clear our surgical backlog list. We've got 69,000 surgeries that are in the queue, and many of them are surgeries that are beyond what is medically recommended, and that's just unacceptable. We've got one of the most
Well, yeah, it's because you're underfunding the healthcare system and making surgeons quit and increasing the queue. Like, what?
Invested healthcare systems in the entire country and in the world, and yet we're not getting the kind of results that I
No, we do not have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. First of all, we're two-tiered, so it's automatically a fucking L. We lose to all of Europe in healthcare. We lose to China in healthcare. We lose to Australia and New Zealand in healthcare. We lose to Japan and Korea in healthcare. And like, even in like the Western Hemisphere, we lose to fucking Cuba in healthcare as well. But to be fair, Cuba is like really good when it comes to the healthcare though. So there's that.
I think Albertans expect. So I would say that that's what we're going to be judged on, is if you need to get picked.
Like, the only reason why you think that is because we're not America healthcare. That's the only reason.
Up in an ambulance and get dropped off. Can you do that quickly, or are you going to be sitting for hours in the back of an ambulance? If you go to an emergency room, are you going to be seen and treated quickly, or are you going to wait?
I wonder whose fault that is. I wonder whose fault that is.
29 hours. And if you are waiting for a knee or hip replacement, are you getting it in a reasonable period of time, or are you waiting 4 years? So we have a baseline that I inherited, and those are the measures I'm looking at, and I think we'll be judged on that basis. And I think people will see progress very soon.
Coming up,
it turned out to be a very bad decision.
The Premier on controversial past comments.
Uh-oh.
And where she says her opinions have evolved. Next.
Uh-oh, this is gonna be fucking awesome.
There have been some headlines recently about comments that you've made in the past that have created controversy, both recently and really in the distant past. And you've suggested that some of the things that you've said, say as a talk show host, for example, shouldn't really count anymore because you weren't in politics at the time.
Why? Like, if you're still upholding those views, why shouldn't they? Like, yeah, if you go back on my timeline, on Twitter, like, not even too far ago, like, maybe like 3 years ago, you can see how, you can see shit that, you know, I probably shouldn't have said. right? It's yeah, we all do make mistakes, but my position has changed. Her position has not.
I want to ask you how you think that voters are supposed to view you or judge you as a potential candidate for premier in the next election if they can't rely on things that you've said in the past being an indicator of who you would be as premier.
Well, when you're a talk show host, you take on provocative issues because your job is to be provocative and your job is.
No. I do political commentary. And I don't do provocative shit. Like, what? Like, doing political commentary is like one of the most like what's the best way I can put it? Like one of the most unfun things to do. Because like if you do like one thing wrong, like everyone's gonna eat your ass. Like look at like literally any leftist on the internet, right? So no, it's not. You don't have to be intentionally provocative. You just want to fucking do it because, you know, it'll make you money.
Just have really tough discussions about the issues that are out there in the media and that people are talking about. When you're premier, your job is to solve problems. And I'm not interested in...
I mean, you've just been doing a lot of talking and making more problems. You haven't been solving any fucking problems.
Provoking Albertans into getting them fighting with each other and being angry.
Yeah, you are.
That's not my job. My job is to try to find solutions and to find areas of common ground so that we can agree. So that's, I think,
Despite the fact that that common ground is like nothing between you and Albertans. Like, you have no idea of what like Albertans want.
The fundamental difference is that when you're in the media, you kind of take the issues as they emerge, whereas in government you have to identify issues that are problems and you've got to work in good faith to be able to solve them. So I think they're just different jobs.
But isn't it fair for people to take things that you've said in the past and assume that you believe them?
The difference in politics is that it's a team. That I'm not a dictator. I have to make sure that...
I mean, for one, you're acting very dictatorish, and for two, it is a team. It is essentially a fucking team-based sport. That's what fucking politics is. Like, tell that to like any fucking conservative or just like literally anyone in parliament right now. Like, they know it's a fucking team sport. Like, even Canadian citizens, like even like non-stupid Canadian citizens recognize that as well. Like, come on.
That anything that I do, number one, gets the support of the people. Number two has the support of my caucus. Number three has the support of my ministers. Number four...
The funny thing is that you don't have support outside of like your caucus, which is really funny.
Has the support of stakeholders. And number
like, who
five
gives a
has
shit
as
about
much collaboration as
stakeholders?
possible. So it's quite different when you're in the media and you're able to just pontificate on whatever happens to be the issue of the day. But when you're in a leadership position, you've got to make sure that you've got your team behind you. So it's going to be a very different process.
I know that you've said, and you brought this up in your address to the province, is that, you know, your opinions have evolved on a number of different issues over the years. I just want to ask...
Literally only because she's gotten pushback against it.
What specifically were you talking about? What areas have your opinions evolved?
Well, I would say there's a couple. I mean, obviously, I thought I was making the right decision to bring our parties together in 2014 when I made that decision, and it turned out to be a very bad decision. And I spent 7 years trying to re-earn the trust of people to be able to run for politics again. I would say that's one. On the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, that's another area. I was one of the, I think one of the first conservatives to say that we could meet a carbon neutral target. And I've been doing all kinds of work over the last number of years to talk about carbon technology, carbon capture and storage, talk about...
I mean, carbon capture is just a fucking fraud. It's not anything. It's nothing.
hydrogen, talk about how we might be able to export more LNG to reduce emissions around the world, talk about nature-based solutions. So I think that's one area where I've seen how our industry and innovation is really going to be able to solve this problem, and I'm very excited about that. So I would say those are a couple things.
I know another area where you said that your opinion had evolved was on the comments you made about Ukraine, and you did apologize for those. But
yeah, that was fucking wild.
What you didn't apologize for was saying that unvaccinated people were the most discriminated against group.
I mean, yeah, probably because she's unvaccinated and she feels discriminated against, which is really fucking funny.
That you'd seen in your lifetime, despite calls from a number of different minority groups that you do that. Why was that?
Unvaccinated people were discriminated against.
No, they weren't.
I'm glad to see that most of our businesses have moved on from that. Not all, but I've made my position on it very clear that we shouldn't have any discrimination in this province for any reason. And I'm looking forward to those last companies that are still having practices that aren't in line with that. I'm looking forward to working with them to make them a lot more embracing of where we need to go. We need to treat medical choice as a choice, and
I mean, yeah, but there's objectively bad choices. You are aware of that, right?
We need to be treating COVID as endemic, and that means that we need to have some new practices. I'm pretty clear about that.
But you understand why groups would have been upset when you said they were the most discriminated against group in your lifetime. Do you still believe that?
I just, I'm glad
Yes,
that we no
she
longer
does.
have people banned from going to restaurants and banned from leaving the country and banned from watching their kids play hockey games. That was pretty hard for people. I'm glad we no longer have people.
Oh no, boo-hoo, they couldn't go see hockey games. Like, what the fuck? Who gives a shit? Like, honestly.
Being fired from their jobs for not being vaccinated. Those are all very positive, and I just want to make sure.
That is actually something that, if I'm not mistaken, they can do, right? If you're posing like a health risk to people, they 100% can do that, if I'm not mistaken.
That doesn't ever happen again.
Still ahead, who is Danielle Smith outside of politics?
I'm going to really date myself.
Talk show host.
I was a Duran Duran fan back in the day.
When a conversation with the Premier returns.
Gives a shit, right?
I think Albertans want to know a little bit more about who Danielle Smith is outside of politics. So we have a couple rapid fire questions here for you to give people a better sense of who you are. What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is Groundhog Day.
And why is that?
I probably, it's so funny because it is about the same day happening over and over.
The irony, man. The irony in that.
And I've probably watched it 20 or 30 times. I did read that I think they envisioned initially that the character was in the same day for 10,000 years, if you can imagine that. So I think it's, I just love Bill Murray as an actor. It's such a fun show.
What are you reading right now?
I am not reading as much as I would like to.
Bro, I don't even know if she can read. Like, she didn't even know what was in the fucking Sovereignty Act, so I don't even think, like, the 2 brain cells that she has, like, knows how to read. I'm sorry.
A lot of briefs.
Legislation, maybe?
A lot of briefs.
Yeah.
My staff keeps me pretty busy, but when I do have a rare moment to read, I was reminded of Unfinished Business, which was a book that Ralph Klein had his cabinet read when he first got elected.
I
so
read
Roger
that, yeah.
Douglas. Yeah, so I'm working my way through that one.
What's your favorite recording artist? Do you have one?
I'm gonna really date myself. I was a Duran Duran fan back in the day, so anytime Hungry Like the Wolf comes, and I noticed this because in the restaurants they're all playing Duran Duran now, so I know that they're trying to target to my demographic.
Yeah, sure.
I like the honesty there, Duran. What's your
Fucking laugh is so annoying, man.
favorite vacation spot?
It has been Puerto Vallarta for years and years and years, but I've just discovered Panama, and so that's going to be my new vacation spot.
And who is Danielle Smith in her downtime? What do you do for fun?
I like to, well, I like to laze around.
She doesn't have any fun. she's too busy destroying fucking Alberta right now. That's the fun she has.
With a morning coffee, looking out the window, dogs at my feet, and then bundle myself up and go for a long walk in one of the dog parks in town, and then go and enjoy an afternoon beer or wine with my husband at our favorite restaurant. That's probably about a perfect day.
Premier Danielle Smith, thanks so much for making.
All right, I wanted to cover this real quick because I forgot that this was a thing, and I just remembered it. So the Rogers Shaw deal is in limbo against as competition watchdogs get a temporary stay. The Competition Bureau says a federal court has issued an emergency stay, temporarily suspending the Competition Tribunal's dismissal of its case against Rogers Communications Inc. Inc.'s $26 billion of takeover of Shaw Communications Inc. The federal agency says the suppression will remain in place until its application for a stay and an injunction is heard. The injunction would block the deal from closing until the Bureau's full appeal of the decision renders on Thursday is heard. The tribunal said in its ruling that the merger was not likely to result in higher prices for wireless customers, and that it was satisfied a plan to sell Shaw's Freedom Mobile to Quebecer Inc. Videotron was acquitted to ensure competition isn't sustainably reduced. The Bureau had sought to block the merger, and in its appeal argues that the tribunal acted outside of its jurisdiction in a rush to judgment. If the tribunal's decision stands, the merger will only require the approval of Federal Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne to go ahead. Champagne said Saturday that he will wait until there is clarity in the ongoing legal process before issuing a decision. The deal was originally scheduled to close by the end of the year, with a possible extension to January 30th. I mean, it's going to get rid of competition for sure. So, like, it's a nothing argument, right? It's a joke. It's just going to hurt Canadian consumers even more. It's going to rise up prices for telecom bills and everything. It is what it is. But with that, I guess we'll call it there. Thanks to everyone for stopping by, and I hope everyone has a good time. New schedule will be starting tomorrow. I'm not too sure if I'll actually be able to stream tomorrow, but new schedule will be starting tomorrow. For further details, just take a look at my stream schedule. Until then.